Hang on. How does the song go?
Da da. Oh wait, are you trying to do like the very beginning and then going into it? Or you can just do like the theme of da 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 da
Okay, I'm gonna
da
do
da da
that
da
because I
da
cannot like
da da da
sing the
da
tune right
da.
now.
Yeah.
So it's ba 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 ba. Hello, welcome to my channel, and today I am talking Star Wars in honor of May 4th, 2024. Joining me today is my guest Meredith Loftus, uh, writer, and we're going to be talking Star Wars on the internet, a very questionable decision made by both of us. But Meredith, before we go any further, I just wanted to, one, give you a second to just introduce yourself, and two, also just kind of get a second to get your love of Star Wars and kind of what the goal of today's episode is.
Cool. Well, one, talking about Star Wars on the internet, I have a pretty bad feeling about this. Hey, just kidding. Hi, I'm Meredith. I wouldn't say I'm a lifelong Star Wars fan, but I'm pretty close to being a lifelong Star Wars fan. I was introduced to Star Wars actually in 1999 when Phantom Menace came out. That was technically my first Star Wars movie. And I grew up with the prequel trilogy, and I was introduced around that time to the original trilogy as well. And I have been a big fan of Star Wars for most of my life, but I didn't really consider myself a fangirl of Star Wars, like openly really talk about my love for Star Wars until the sequel trilogy came out, starting in 2015. And yeah, I don't know what to say other than I'm just a fan of Star Wars. I have gone to Star Wars Celebration in the past. I've had the opportunity to go with work and be able to meet some of the actors behind Star Wars. I have met BB-8, BB-8 my life. BB-8 is my child, not just this one right here, but I have met BB-8, and it was excellent. No notes. I have hugged Chewie and cried. I have sassed Kylo Ren at Disneyland and almost got kicked out, but that's a different story. But
And
um,
we'll explore that in part two of the pod.
I mean, but the thing is, like, Star Wars is it's just a magical world to explore in the world of fantasy, in the world of sci-fi, in the world of franchises that have come to define people and generations and pop culture. It's one of the few that has stood the test of time, and we live in such an abundance of Star Wars that we tend to forget how much of a novelty and how much of a risk it was when it came out initially in 1977. And look at where we're at now. And I love May the 4th and Revenge of the 5th. So I'm so excited to be able to look back, reflect, and talk about all of my favorite stuff of Star Wars, and even the stuff of Star Wars that I'm not the biggest fan of. And that's okay, because there's just so much in Star Wars. We're not bound to love everything that has come out of any iteration of Star Wars. So I'm sure we will get into that. But yeah, those are my jumbled feelings about Star Wars. Yeah.
There's a lot to talk about here specifically because I was thinking about the last time I really remember talking about Star Wars on microphone in any form of like a recording setting, and I it was really early in my podcasting days. I want to say it was like within the first 10 episodes. So we're talking 2021, I think is when I kickstarted the podcast. And we did Phantom Menace. I don't remember why we chose Phantom Menace specifically to start with, besides it being number one uh, in the lineage. But we started with Phantom Menace, and I think at the time, Star Wars was in a very different place in my understanding of it, and kind of all of ours, where it was still largely movie based. And this TV phenomenon was a fairly new thing. I think at that point, besides the animated shows, 2021, I really want to say it was just Mando season 1 and season 2 that had come out, because I think, yeah, because Boba Fett's 2022. So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I think at that point we'd only experienced Star Wars live action and TV in the first 2 seasons of Mando. And so when we were talking about it, it's very different than now 3 years later. Yeah, it has been 3 years actually, almost to the day. With it, where Star Wars is a property that has maybe largely for the past, I mean, really since COVID is TV based now. Like it's a really weird thing to think about that one of the biggest movies of all time has now shifted entirely to streaming. And I think we're going to talk about some of those ideas today. Uh, I should just admit, so the goal of this episode, in trying to talk about it, is one, talk about our love of Star Wars, two, to keep it fun and light. That is entirely my goal. I've been on YouTube long enough that I know how Star Wars discussions can just be accessible, and I really don't want to engage in that. So I'm trying to keep it positive while giving what I believe to be fair criticism of this. But it is going to be essentially what May the 4th is in spirit, a celebration of Star Wars. So that's my goal today. Meredith, one of the most fun people that I know online, one a person who is really willing to dive into the the topics that not a lot of other people would want to put themselves out for. And I mean that because you've talked Taylor Swift. The Swifties had a response. They let me know about it for sure. Uh, Not as much you. I don't think you probably, I don't remember hearing anything much about you. I certainly heard some reputation takes that people were not thrilled with.
I'm sure I'm sorry. I missed all of whatever stuff you got thrown at you. They was not thrown at me, but I did write a review about tortured poets recently. So I understand people Swifties are in a very interesting place, and if they have a strong opinion, they're gonna let you know. So
Did we last record when we did the Eras Tour review? I was trying to remember this. You might remember it better. Was Taylor dating Travis Kelsey at that point? Was that a public relationship?
yes,
Okay, that was public by the time of the Eras
they
Tour.
were dating at that
Okay,
point.
I was trying to remember that. But yeah, so we're talking Star Wars today. We kind of have a weird way of doing this because I wanted to inflict kind of chaos into the conversation, and it's far more fun to do that with a guest because when I do it by myself, it's just kind of derailing my quality of episode and only making my life harder in the editing bay. So how we're doing this is we are talking Star Wars, and we do largely have the movies and TV here. However, we added a few wild card categories. I believe, Meredith, you had two random ones, and I
I
have
I have two and a half,
two
which
and a
the
half.
half one we'll cross that bridge when we get there.
And I think I have four. I think I have four wild card categories, and they'll come in every place. I wanted to really make sure that it wasn't just going to be all on the top or all on the bottom. They are really mixed in there just to add a fun level of chaos to this conversation. But with that all said, Meredith, I'm sure we're about to really get into our discussion of Star Wars and probably what Star Wars means to us as we kind of go through the history of Star Wars. Is there anything you want to say before we really kickstart this adventure?
Please be kind, guys. Star Wars is such a big galaxy. What I love and what Ben loves is going to be different than what you love. And to quote Rose Tico, which you can have opinion about her or not, it's not about destroying the things we hate, it's saving the things that we love. And I just ask that I for anyone responding to this, just know we love Star Wars and we're going to have different opinions, and that's okay. And it's going to be fun. So come along with us, and remember, may the fourth be with you. So
Yeah,
luminous beings are we.
and well, my goal here on my side is to make sure that while talking about it, and I have 25 entries on my list, and I'm 26. I should have actually added another one just to get to the 26. It would have been far more better to kind of do that as a representation of each year. But I didn't think of that before recording, so screw that idea. So I have the 25 here. And again, the goal is to kind of just see a history of fandom and Star Wars and what it has meant to me in my life, what I respond to, what I don't respond to. what works, what doesn't, and just all around a celebration of George Lucas's universe that was created in 1977. Uh, Funny enough, I'm actually seeing for the first time, you just mentioned it, that Phantom Menace was your first Star Wars movie in theater. I will be seeing it in theaters on May the 4th. It will be my first time seeing it in theaters. So I'm quite excited for that. But with that all said, uh, we're going to dive into this, and there's no real cohesive way to do this because Meredith, you have
I
how
have
many?
20, I have 20 Star Wars related things on my list that are ranked. You have 25, so
Hmm,
we're already starting in chaos.
yeah. Okay. Let's just start with a few of these. And I'm just going to kind of hit a few and then I'll just kind of throw it over to you. Number 25, I know for a fact you told me you hadn't seen this. So we'll just kind of start with that. And it
Okay.
was in the summer of 2008, right before I went into fifth grade. My grandma took my sister and I to go see Star Wars in the movie theaters. It was not Revenge of the Sith. It was not Attack of the Clones. It was not Phantom Menace. It was actually my first Star Wars movies, technically in theater, was 2008 Star Wars: The Clone Wars, which was technically, if I know my history correct, it was actually the pilot episode of
Mhm.
the Clone Wars. Or actually, I don't even think it was technically geared as the pilot episode. It was supposed to be just like a random episode arc within the first season of Clone Wars that they ended up putting in theaters. Uh, Not a good movie. Haven't revisited it since 2008. Meredith, you haven't seen it.
I have not seen it, no. And something you're going to find from my list is I have very little representation of the animated side of Star Wars on my list. And it's not for lack of, oh, I just don't I don't respect animation. I do. Just the idea of going back and watching those has been very overwhelming for me. And but I know so many people love Clone Wars and Rebels and Bad Batch currently. So there's definitely a lot of love and richness in Clone Wars. But I do know that the Clone Wars movie has a reputation because it did start off very rocky, that not a lot of people love it, but people really love the Clone Wars series itself.
Yeah, and I'll get to the Clone Wars because have seen all of the Clone Wars, so I will talk about that in a second on this list. In terms of MVP, which I actually don't think is a category that I've really mentioned yet, the goal of each ranking is we kind of selected one thing that we stand out as our MVP. And it can be something as specific as an actor, it can be a director, whatever we deem it to be. And I also made it just so broad that we can kind of put anything in this category. And that's kind of what I did. The MVP of this movie, The Clone Wars, was my mom for buying me the Hasbro toys in
Mhm.
'08. I had Obi-Wan Kenobi, I had Anakin, I had the really weird looking Yoda figure because he looks so weird in the Clone Wars. I had all of those and had those toys for years. So great memory for me. In terms of that, the rest of that Clone Wars '08, not much else to talk about because we'll get to the actual Clone Wars TV show in a second. Number 24, I'll just do a few more, rattle them off real quick. And I believe this one you did have on your list of having seen. It's my least favorite of the live action Star Wars shows. And like I said, I'm trying to make sure that I'm not being too negative, and also like the next five are just going to look really negative. And it's been my critique of Star Wars for the past 3 or 4 years is some of my problems with the transition to TV, and it's also goes against my fundamental belief. If you're gonna make a TV show, a lot of times you can just make a movie, and that's how I feel about a lot of these Star Wars projects. And none of them really exemplifies that format better than the Book of Boba Fett for me, which is a show that I I remember watching it week to week with my friend, and I remember each week just being like, "This is not working for me." And then they bring in an episode where Mando gets his N1 starfighter, and I'm like, oh, I'm so back. Like this, we're so back in Star Wars. And then like, and you've seen the show, right?
I
Okay.
have.
Okay, I wanted to make sure because I was about to spoil something. So spoiler real quick. They make the decision to undercut the Grogu and Mandalorian leave, and
Mhm.
they do it in not Mandalorian season 3. They do it in a random Boba Fett spin-off show in episode 5 of 7. And then by the
Mhm.
time everyone goes to Mandalorian season 3, they're like, "Wait, how is Grogu back?" Well, you had to watch the Book of Boba Fett, which not a lot of people did. I had to explain that whole thing to my mom because she's like, "What's going on in Mando season 3?" And I'm like, "Yeah, they didn't really set it up for you." Besides that, I will say my MVP is an N1 Starfighter, which is the vehicle. There's nothing cooler than a Star Wars vehicle, and the Starfighter is one of the coolest vehicles in Star Wars. Meredith, Book of Boba Fett, any thoughts?
Well, it's definitely on my list, and I definitely will probably say more things about of Boba Fett soon. But I agree with you that with Book of Boba Fett, it's definitely one of my least favorite. It is my least favorite live action series that we have from Star Wars, and most of it is because I don't really think it was necessary. And the only time I got invested in it was when the Mandalorian stuff was reintroduced again, which you should have just made that Mandalorian season 3 instead. But I do think there were some good aspects with it, obviously, which we can get into later when I talk about it. But yeah, I'm there with you. It just why did we do this?
There was this incredible anecdote that I want to share. It was because Book of Boba Fett came out right around the time. In fact, it might have been the same week as Spider-Man No Way Home came out. And on my podcast that week, I had Scott Mance on as a guest. And it was
Oh,
like the
wow.
day after Book of Boba Fett had aired. And he jumps on the Zoom and he's like, "Book of Boba Fett, what do you think?" And in the Scott Mance voice. And I'm like, "Oh, first half of the episode I was kind of into it. Second half of it, I like wasn't so into it." And he's like, "Yeah, I thought the same thing. It's gonna get better though, like week to week, right?" Like, and I'm like, "Hopefully." And he's like, "It will." And then like just we talked about it later, I believe, at some point. It was just like we all just kind of had that same feeling after a while. And again, the first episode I was pretty into it, but I was like a little hesitant, and then it couldn't keep my attention.
Also, Mance is a little biased because, and he knows this too, he is much more of a Star Trek fan than he is
Mm.
a Star Wars fan. So I always take anything he says with a grain of salt at first. But yes, he was like right on the money with Book of Boba Fett. But I'm always like, anytime I get a hot take Star Wars opinion from him, I'm like, well, you are a Star Trek fan first. So I need to like temper my expectations.
It's a very fair point.
Love you, Mance.
It was such a funny thing. I remember us all talking about it right before we started recording the episode, and we were all just like, "Yeah, but like Mandalorian was so good that like this is gonna like just improve." And it's just trying to move away from the negative. You said you'll bring up Book of Boba Fett in a second. 23 on my list, and I actually don't remember if you have this one. And I might get into spoiler territory, so please stop me if you don't want to know spoilers, Meredith. I have
I will let you know.
Mandalorian. I have Mandalorian, but specifically season 3. I
Mm,
I did break it up because to me there was a very clear breaking point. And the reason I had the breaking point is because of the same reason that I brought in with Book of Boba Fett, where they made a decision in the Book of Boba Fett to not undercut a lot of what happened in Mandalorian season 2, but just it was very hard to follow if you didn't watch the Book of Boba Fett. And it just kind of made it a jarring experience to watch a show that really didn't answer those questions and just kind of yada yada over it. And uh the whole season I just remember really thinking like this really needed the Book of Boba Fett context to work, and I had seen it, but there was still just so much that they just kind of went over real quick that the
mm.
season itself kind of felt very incomplete. Did you have this on your list?
I actually don't have season 3 on my list, but I do have Mandalorian seasons broken up on this
Okay.
list.
Okay, I like that idea. I will just say a quick MVP on this, and I want to be careful. Do you know just generally who appears in this season?
Yes, I do. Like you can
Okay, so
spoil, it's totally fine.
okay, my MVP is Giancarlo Esposito,
Mhm.
who is just anytime he is on screen, specifically anytime he's on screen as a villain, I'm just I'm locked in. Like my body starts shaking. Like I have a visceral reaction whenever he comes on screen. And every time. And at some point, it's just like, oh, is he just getting typecast? And I'm like, maybe, but I don't care. Like every time, whether it's in The Boys, whether it's in Mandalorian, whether it's in Breaking Bad, whether it's him just appearing in a nothing role in Abigail recently, like every time he's on screen, I'm instantly transfixed by what he is able to personify as an antagonist. And I'm just so captured by him as a performer that I'm just locked in. And he does that in spades in Mandalorian season 3 upon his return. And it's just such a thrilling thing. And that was the moment of the show where I really felt it like bringing me back in. And then it still wasn't able to satisfy my hopes by the end, but he does so much of the heavy lifting. And that's what he does so well as an actor is he can kind of just make stuff that doesn't really deserve to work in incredible degrees.
I mean, he is a phenomenal actor, and I have briefly met him once, and he's just as great as you imagine him to be, honestly. And I loved him when he was on this show once upon a time, and he was like the magic
That was the
mirror in that.
I was trying to figure out what the name of that show was. I was thinking of it in my
Yes.
head and I just couldn't lock down the name of that show. I'm gonna take a break real quick. Do you want to do let's do True for You real quick.
Sure thing. So as a reminder, I do have just 20 on my list. So at the very bottom of my list, number 20 is Attack of the Clones.
No, really? That low? I
Yes.
guess it's actually not that low because I'll spoil it. I have it at 19. So I
All
guess it's
right.
actually like we're basically
We're
tied.
kind of similar there. Yeah. So yeah, Attack of the Clones, um, of the prequel trilogy, which is definitely going through a resurgence of love with the 20th anniversaries of many of the prequel trilogy and those projects coming back into the fold. Sorry to my neighbors or whoever's driving down the street. Um, but Attack of the Clones is it's between that and Phantom Menace. I kind of flip flop as far as what's at the bottom of my list, and it really depends on my mood and how I'm feeling about either of them. But with Attack of the Clones, it's definitely the clunkiest of the bunch, and there's
Mm,
so much in it that I feel like could have been better if they would have tweaked it or gave focus to different storylines better. As far as like an MVP goes, when I was younger, I used to say it was the love story between Anakin and
mm.
Padme, which as I have grown up, I have realized, oh no, this is actually terrible. So the MVP is my dad, who I made sit and watch Attack of the Clones with me far more than he probably wanted to, but he was a trooper throughout it, especially when TNT used to have those like marathons of Star Wars on the weekends, and we would just watch them all in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 order, and we would not skip episode 2 as much as he probably wanted to.
I was born in 1998, so I have a really weird relationship with the prequels in the sense that like it was what's that saying? Like I was only given like this type of food growing up, and thus I became accustomed to believing that was something far better than it was.
Mm-hmm.
So all my prequel thoughts are still kind of behind rose tinted goggles, thinking about where I'm just sitting there. I'm like, but I loved it so much when I was 8. And it's still the weird experience that I have today where I know Attack of the Clones is not particularly good. I'll throw it on and I'm still get like as I'm watching it, and it's a movie I've seen how many ever times, I still keep getting to moments and I'm like, this happens in the movie? Like I don't remember this at all. And again, this is a movie that I've seen countless times. And every time I still have that thought of just for a quick second, I'm like, I don't remember this. Like this didn't actually like happen in the movie that I remember watching. Uh I I think there is certain elements of Attack of the Clones that I really like. I will have my MVP right now for it because again, I have it at number 19. My MVP of it was Tamara Morrison's Clones, which was
Mm.
somebody got the idea of let's just clone Tamara Morrison thousands of times, and honestly, probably deserves a raise at Fox for doing that. brilliant decision on their part. More Tamara Morrison is always better in clone form. So that is really my MVP for this Attack of the Clones. Besides that, we'll talk about Hayden and Ewan in a second. Uh,
Yes.
I there's a lot to there's a lot that I remember about Attack of the Clones, like just always being obsessed with, and I think Christopher Lee is a big portion of that movie for me. Which Count
Hmm.
Dooku, there was a look to him. He has one of my favorite lightsabers. Do I have it in this room? I don't think I do. Yeah, I don't see it. The curved hilt of his, like, there is a lot that I have fondness for. The Yoda fight, uh, the Battle of Geonosis. Like, there's
Hmm.
stuff in there as a whole. I think the dramatic weight of the movie is somewhere in Lucas's script. I just don't know if it always fully comes to screen.
Hmm.
So that's what I'll say on that. Let's do. I think you might have hinted at your number 19.
Yes. So my number 19, not to beat a dead horse here, but let's wrap it all up. The Book of Boba Fett. It is my, as I already said, it's my least favorite of the live action TV series, I think. And this is a hot take, but I don't have a fondness for Boba Fett in general.
I'm the same way. Django was always superior to me. He just does
Well,
more.
well, just both of them. Like, I just never found the appeal of Boba Fett or Jango Fett as just like these bounty hunters. And obviously, when we got Mandalorian, like Mandalorian himself, Din Djarin was like a much more interesting
Mm.
bounty hunter in my eyes. But that is, we will get into later. But with the Book of Boba Fett, I did like the idea of the like getting into the seedy underworld of like being a crime boss, and I liked the concept of what we could do with Book of Boba Fett, but the execution, like for a show called Book of Boba Fett becomes just less relevant as the series goes on, and that's a huge problem. But I love his relationship with Fennec Shand, and that's honestly probably like my biggest highlight of Book of Boba Fett. I am a Bonek shipper. Like I Bonek, I thought the two of them should have kissed at some point, and it never happened. But there is just like a deep care for each other that I see, and we were robbed of making it more in my eyes. But that is neither here nor there.
I wonder if that's going to color your opinion on a movie coming up semi soon, possibly on our list.
Potentially,
We'll
we
see.
will find out.
We'll see that in a second. I almost had Fennec as my MVP uh, of the Book of Boba Fett. My whole issue with it was specifically with giving MVP was, and it was the thing you just said a second ago, which is the characters that are the main characters in Book of Boba Fett quite literally start disappearing as the show goes along. If I recall, between episode 5 and 6, because I remember writing a review of this because I was just so confused by the decision of Boba Fett not being in 2 episodes of his 7 episode TV show. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that's largely the same with Fennec in episodes 5 and 6 of it. But I've already talked about Boba Fett enough. I'll jump back into mine, and I really hate doing this one because and this is really the last one where I'll be like pretty ultra negative. The rest of them, there's a lot that I do like in these uh entries. 22 for me. I have Ahsoka. I This show was I really, and I did a review for this on this channel about it where I kind of voiced my frustrations with it. I It was the first time in a while that I had felt from Star Wars where I just wasn't connecting with it anymore, and not only like not connecting with it, just not finding the fun and excitement of it anymore, where it was just like, this is so technically proficient. uh these are all actors giving performances that I would qualify as good. Like, there's
Mm-hmm.
nothing that I can inherently point out week to week that I'm like, this is so bad. And yet I just found my interest continuing to wait. And by the end of the season, I couldn't really do it. I was really forcing myself to watch it. I watched it with my best friend and girlfriend, and we all just kind of like I remember my best friend was like really trying to get into it because he's really into the Thrawn story. He really likes the animated stuff. Like he gave it the most attention out of all of us and was really trying to find the redeeming qualities. And still, just by the end, it was just I had this like something just completely missing where it felt like not soulless is not the correct word to use, but for lack of a better word, I the imagination just felt sucked out, and it made it like a really hard hang week to week. Did
I
you
mean,
finish? You didn't
so
finish it, right? You told me you didn't finish this one on
so
your.
I mean, I can go ahead and say so. Number 18 on my list is Ahsoka.
Okay.
So I'm just going to go ahead and piggyback off of this. And to answer your question, no, I did not finish Ahsoka,
How
and I
far did you
still would
get?
rank it above the Book of Boba Fett. Um, So I got through, I believe, the first 3 or 4 episodes of
Okay.
Ahsoka. And for me, because one, I was going into it, I did not have the same type of love of nostalgia for Clone Wars or Rebels or even the Thrawn stuff. Like, so I was really behind on this. So yes, commenters call me a fake fan, whatever. Um, but with Ahsoka, it was definitely one of those shows where I liked the idea of it, but because it felt like work to watch
Mhm.
Ahsoka.
Yeah,
And Ahsoka herself, Rosario Dawson, I just don't
I
think.
didn't vibe with the performance, and I love Rosario
And
Dawson.
I love Rosario Dawson as well. Yeah, like I just it was incredible to watch her come into Mandalorian season 2, and she was a fan cast for years for live action. So to see her like finally be here and like she looked the part, she sounded
Mhm.
great. I was like, okay, I have some high confidence that she can do this. And within those first 2 episodes, I got no sense of her personality. I got no sense of like who she was. And that is, again, a big problem. If you have a show, like you have the protagonist of your series, and can we pause a second?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. I am so sorry
You
about
were totally
that.
fine.
Um, I don't even remember what was my last point that I made.
You were
Trying
talking
to give
about
it.
Rosario Dawson's performance.
Yes. Okay.
Don't worry, I can edit around, and I made sure I went silent so I know exactly where to cut.
Where to cut? Yeah. Um, yeah. So with you know Rosario Dawson coming into the role, and I was really excited about her to not really get a sense of her character. It was just really frustrating. And this is now the second time with a series when you have your main character, the titular character is the least interesting part of the show, then like what are we doing?
Mm.
And because of that, and I think just where I was at with Star Wars at the time, like I just didn't feel the need to keep up with Star Wars. With Ahsoka, it felt like coming down off of the high that I had been experiencing with the Andor series, that which we will
We will
definitely
get to
talk about.
Andor.
We will get to Andor,
We
but
will get to Andor. Trust me.
but because of that, like Ahsoka just felt like a lot of work to me. And it's a series that I have not finished, but I do have an MVP that I want to share, which is my MVP being Ray Stevenson's
Mm.
Balin Skull, which RIP Ray Stevenson. I did think that he was a very interesting character. He brought a lot of nuance, and I think if he would have, if he hadn't died, we could have gotten even more from him in future storylines. And so that was, so rest in peace, Ray Stevenson. But yeah, I wanted to care about Ahsoka, but I couldn't even finish it. And so, but I needed to be fair in this list, and so that's where I'm at with it.
No, I totally think that's fair, and I think you and I echo a lot of the same sentiments. I remember when the show was coming out, I was kind of at times just baffled by some of the reception that the show was getting by fans, where I was just like, I it was one of those things where I started having the existential crisis of like, if they actually lean towards this direction of Star Wars and less from, which we'll get to, Andor, which I thought was something else, like, that's where I was starting to really just feel like the divide, and I'm like, maybe I just don't have my finger on the pulse of Star Wars anymore. I remember, just as a quick aside with Ahsoka, Andy Greenwald on the Ringers podcast, The Watch, he was talking about it because he's worked with Rosario Dawson before on a TV show, I believe, that he was working on. And like Rosario Dawson has always talked about like how this was a dream role for her, how excited she was to do it. And it was always something that bothered me in the show itself, where then you see the show and the enthusiasm of that character just didn't feel necessarily there. And I think it's the issue of, I specifically kept noting it week to week, it was just everyone kind of felt like they were giving the same type of performance, where it was just pretty calm, collected, reserved, and there was just its fun imagination lacking from it. Which, and this is a mean one, I will totally admit it. My MVP of this was actually Eckstein's vocal performance, because while
Mm,
watching Ahsoka, I was just like, one, I was just like, I understand why they wanted to go Rosaria Dawson for the name. I think she looks great in the role. And I think that she is capable of giving a great Ahsoka performance, because I think Rosaria Dawson, as a natural actor, leans more towards the characteristics of Ahsoka that I like. But while watching it, I was just kept thinking of like X9's performance just does so much joy and fun to the role that I really like. It made me really appreciate her role. So I don't want to get any more negative than that. And I've already done my reviews of Ahsoka, so we can kind of just move on from there. 20, I'm going to do a little bit of a cheat. I originally wrote down the Bad Batch season one.
mm.
And then when I was trying to think of an MVP of it, I just couldn't remember anything of the Bad Batch when I watched it, which was again season one. I remember liking it. So I decided to pull a mulligan, and this one should be actually higher, but I'm just replacing it here because I want to give the book a quick shout out. Uh, Probably one of the most influential voices for me growing up in Star Wars and on YouTube was Ken Knapsack, and he wrote an incredible
Ah,
book.
Kid Knapsack.
Yeah, he wrote an incredible book. I want to say in 2019, Why We Love Star Wars: The Great Moments That Built a Galaxy Far, Far Away. So I
Hmm.
wanted to just give a quick plug to that instead of Bad Batch real quick, and just say it's an excellent book. If you're actually going technically, it should be higher than 20, but just as it's coming in as a switch. I've met Ken a handful of times. Always delightful. Always loved talking Star Wars with him, even if it was just for a few brief moments at a comedy club. Uh, so that's coming in at number 20. Well worth pick up the book. It's a really good read.
I have my copy as well. And Ken, I have hung out with him a few times. Delightful person. Will always lend an ear and talk Star Wars with you. So
Yeah,
great
so
guy.
that's my, I think that now deals with my, oh, I guess that was 21 for me. So that leaves my top 20. So I'll do one more real quick. I wonder if we're gonna really differ on this one. Where
We'll
do you have
see.
Rise of Skywalker on your list?
Oh, I want to save that.
Okay. I'll put it, I'll pin my conversation. I have Rise of
Okay.
Skywalker at number 20. So we'll get to it when we get to yours.
Got it.
Let's flip back to you.
So I am now on 17, which for 17 for me is the Phantom Menace.
Okay, I knew this was coming because you had kind of alluded to that a second ago.
Yeah, so depending on my mood, I will flip Attack of the Clones and The Phantom Menace. And The Phantom Menace is my first Star Wars movie, and I think that is why I will always have the edge over Attack of the Clones for me. I got to see it at a drive-in movie theater. Not my cousins, my neighbors invited me, and I mean, it blew my mind seeing it for the first time. Like, I saw my first lightsaber fights for the first time. I saw like this the alien creatures. I saw Yoda for the first time. There was just so many cool, incredible things about it. And I feel like everyone's MVP for the Phantom Menace is going to be Duel of the Fates, which excellent scene, excellent score, like no notes. I also agree it's MVP. But my MVP for the Phantom Menace is
Can
actually
I guess?
Qui-Gon. Oh.
Oh, you said, oh, I was gonna say trade federations. I thought you were really into trade and
Neither
unions.
Gunray and the Trade Federations.
Yeah,
No, it's Jar Jar. No, I'm just kidding.
yeah,
No,
exactly.
it is Qui-Gon Jinn, Liam Neeson as Qui-Gon Jinn. I think that he is definitely one of the most underrated Jedi in the scope of Star Wars. I think he was the perfect balance of what Anakin needed in a master. And so it is the true tragedy of the movie is that he dies, and that is completely alters the course of the type of Jedi and the type of man that Anakin would grow up to be. And so, and I think it was like a few years ago, I heard somebody really explain how the Duel of the Fates like works is also very much about Qui-Gon Jinn, and I'm
Mhm.
floored every time I hear. I think Dave Filoni talked
I think
about
it's
it,
a Filoni
honestly.
thing where he talks about the idea of like it's the duel of the fates is this kid's basically fate
It's
where
his fate. And it's so it's so good. And yeah, I just loved Liam Neeson in it. And I also love Ewan McGregor as well as Obi-Wan Kenobi. And I wish that they had a bit more focus as far as like who is the main character of the prequel trilogy, because if it was Obi-Wan's story, then I feel he does good, but he also is so absent from a lot
mm,
of the movie, and yet he is the most consistent Jedi throughout the trilogy, and I wish we would have had more of him. But I do enjoy Phantom Menace, and I'm so excited for you and all the people who are going to go to theaters this weekend to see Phantom Menace. Because like it truly was like a moment in time, like the way that we had Avengers Endgame, the way that we had Barbenheimer, people flooding to the theaters to go see Phantom Menace back in 1999. And so to get like even a taste of going to the theaters and seeing it on a big screen, I'm sure you're going to have a grand old time.
I'm very excited to see it for the first time in a theater. I'm gonna save my discussion on Phantom Menace for a little bit, so let's do your next one. Was that your number 15, 16? Where am I?
That's going to be my number 16, and it's time to unpin that little thing from earlier because it's the Rise of Skywalker.
Okay, okay, so we're gonna have the talk. I have it at 20.
All right,
So we're pretty close on this.
Rise of Skywalker.
Yeah.
I will go down on record and say that I do love the sequel trilogy. I really
Mm.
do. There is so much of the sequel trilogy I love, and I love how the sequel trilogy ends. However, I don't love the way we got there in the Rise of Skywalker. And so much of the Rise of Skywalker, it's not even representative of the full story that we should have gotten in the sequel trilogy, and it was definitely altered due to the type of backlash that came out of the Last Jedi. And it is such a shame because there's so much good stuff in there. And honestly, if we would have dropped a single planet, just one of those planets that they visited in their like hop across the movie, it would have been a stronger movie. Like I'm so serious on that. And if you want to make death matter, I hate to say this because I love him so much, Chewie should have died.
Mhm.
And
I've
C3PO,
always thought that.
either Chewie or C3PO should have died. And they didn't. They really said death didn't matter until Kylo Ren died, which I laughed when he died.
I did
Because
too.
they kissed and then he died, and I was like, what do you mean that just happened? That's so ridiculous. Um, but of my MVP of The Rise of Skywalker, um, I love the story of Rey. Rey is one of my favorite characters who came out of the sequel trilogy. I love that at the end of the day, she chose her own destiny, and she chose a new name and a new identity of how she's going to move forward in the world. And supposedly we are getting this new Rey movie, and I am so excited to see what Rey does with having the Skywalker name, and how she decides to carry on the legacy of Jedi and what it is moving forward. So like, I think that's a big thing for me. I love her yellow lightsaber. And I also
I have that
love
one as well.
the trio. That's also my MVP. I love that in this movie that we actually had Rey, Finn, and Poe on an adventure together. I thought that was so severely lacking when they were our new central trio that we didn't have. As much as I love The Force Awakens and Last Jedi, which we will get there when we get there, I wanted them to have more of a connection, all three of them together, and we finally got that in this movie. So yeah,
Rise of
that's
Skywalker has a really complicated relationship because I saw it 3 times opening weekend, and I
Mhm,
was lying to myself the first 2 times. Like I was so desperately trying to convince myself that I like this movie a lot. And
mhm,
every time I kept watching it, I just felt it like losing some of that grandeur. I felt that to the point that I haven't seen it since the third time. I own it somewhere back here. I actually even own this, which is I bought the collector's edition
nice.
for the Blu-ray with Disney made. Like there are certain qualities of this movie that I really stand for. Like I mean, just legitimately am very excited, and there's moments in here, and there's specifically performances in this movie that are bar none some of my favorite just bits and pieces within Star Wars. The movie's just extremely disconjointed. It's actually frustratingly tough to watch at times where I'm just like, I really, there needed to be a little bit more cohesive. And I mean, it's been written for years about it. I mean, everyone's had their thoughts about the sequel trilogy. Well, if it was disjointed, if it should have just been one director, if it should have been Ryan Johnson the whole time, if it should have just been JJ. Uh,
Mhm.
all of this, the firing of Colin Trevorrow, all that playing into it. I mean, there's so much to talk about it with this. And I think it shows in the product where I just, while watching it, I do just feel that studio interference, I guess, is probably the best word, where I just really do feel a studio that is just like has heard the criticism of The Last Jedi raging in their comments for 2 years straight now. And they're like, well, you didn't like this. We'll just put this in this movie. Like, you love this. Oh, you love this. Oh, Chewie gets his medal in this. Like, oh, we'll have
Mhm.
the voice of Freddie Prinze Jr. here. Like, jet reference. And it was so just watching it, it is kind of a kitchen sink movie where they throw it all in there, but that also means like at times you throw in really good stuff in the movie. Like there are inklings of this movie that are bar none for me, like legitimately some of my favorite stuff. I'll talk about one of them, and my MVP. This is the only. Actually, I guess I have two co MVPs on this list. I put Adam Driver and Harrison Ford on here.
That was a great scene.
It's one of the most impactful moments of Star Wars ever for me. And I think if I had to really focus on an MVP, it's Adam Driver because every moment he's on screen in this film, I'm locked in because
Mhm.
he is giving this film everything and more that this film doesn't deserve of him as an actor. And he's just incredible. And this scene with Harrison Ford, and I've had my theories on it for years. I don't actually know if it's ever been written about, but I've always theorized that was supposed to be Carrie Fisher. I've always thought that
Yeah.
was supposed to be the moment that she has it, and that's the really impactful thought. And you can also see then Harrison Ford bringing that into that role. And
Mhm.
I think it is Harrison Ford doesn't get the credit for how great of an actor he is. We always kind of think of him as the movie star first. And it's these little moments that he does in his older age, whether it's the Blade Runner 2049 scene where it's just this brief moment where he looks at the eyes of the person that he once loved, or whether it's this moment where he's talking to his son and allowing Kylo Ren to have redemption in this moment. It's beautiful. I mean, it is just so crushingly beautiful, and it is so poetically deserving of a payoff in that scene that I just wish the movie had more of that, because if it had those qualities, I'd be so obsessed with it. It just doesn't get there for me. So that's kind of my feelings of Rise of Skywalker, a movie that I respect at times, have fondness for, but as a whole just doesn't get there for me.
Yeah.
Uh let's jump back to me for a second. So I already said at number 19 I have Attack of the Clones. We kind of talked about this. Number
Mhm.
18, this may be our age gap coming into play real quick.
You're my
Uh
sister's age, by the way. Like you're not
I know
like,
we're not that much different, but
but it
in
is,
Star
you know,
Wars terms, it does feel just like slightly different because you
totally.
got to see Phantom Menace in theaters.
Yeah, but I was born in 93, so I was
You
still
were fairly
like,
young, yeah.
yes, I was like
I think
6 when I
we're
saw.
4 years apart approximately then. Uh I'm going to be so shocked if you ever played this game, but it features a song by Jason Derulo, and I at number 18 as a complete joke, and I will fully admit it, but in terms of memes, there's never been a better meme in Star Wars history than Star Wars Connect. And specifically, the MVP is I'm Han Solo, parody of Riding Solo by Jason Derulo.
I have seen this. I have seen this pop up on Twitter.
This is the greatest thing that's maybe ever existed in Star Wars history. I will fully go to bat that this might be a better song than Riding Solo by Jason Derulo. You know,
I'm sure you would agree.
this is a really weird antidote. I just saw Jason Derulo at a Kings game, a Sacramento Kings game, quite literally, 2 weeks ago, and it was just so random because it's just like, what is Jason Derulo doing here? And
See, that was me when I saw him in Cats, 2019, but
yeah,
that's neither here nor there.
yeah, that Jason Derulo has just kind of lived that whole thing in my life where it's just like, what's Jason Derulo doing in this scene or movie, or in this case, Star Wars parody song? That's all I have to say about Star Wars Connect, a game I've never played, but I will love it for I'm Han Solo for the rest of my life, and I will always have fondness for it. Number 17, I'm curious if we differ greatly on this one. It is a TV show, and I have Kenobi here.
Oh yeah, we're gonna have different opinions on
I,
Obi-Wan Kenobi,
I
but
will put
I'd love to
a
hear your opinions though, so
I'll
it's
put
all
a pin
good.
on it because we'll get to it. I will say that at times I feel like I was overly harsh in my criticism of this show, and
Okay.
I also have criticisms of this show. I'll do one more and then I'll throw it back to you. Number 16, I have a movie here. I do have Solo, a Star Wars story,
All right.
a movie that I think is perfectly entertaining. I don't really have any qualms with it. I don't have a ton of thoughts on it either, but it is just a movie that when I watched it, I enjoyed it. And when I've seen it since, I've enjoyed it. And that's really it. My MVP for this, uh, technically a co one too. The correct answer is Chewbacca. Uh, the answer that I put for MVP was Denny's Diner. For doing an incredible tie-in promotion with including Solo, a Star Wars story cups, which I had the childish Landino one myself. And I got a lot of Star Wars food during that period. And I was in college, and Denny's was right by my house and one of the cheaper options to go at 3 a.m. So Solo, Star
Shout
Wars
out
story.
Denny's.
Yeah, that's my number 16. Do you have it,
Nice.
or I know you have it on your list? Is it a little bit higher, about the same?
It's gonna be a bit higher on my list.
Okay, let's throw it back to you then.
All right. So here's where we're gonna get a little chaotic. So
Okay.
number 15, I'm gonna preface by saying this. I have not played any of the Star Wars video games in any capacity. I am not a gamer outside of Mario Kart. So that is how I feel about video games. Not that but I love video game inspired stuff. Obviously, I love The Last of Us. And I know a lot of people really love Knights of the Old Republic and wanting to see that in live action someday, which I would be very interested in. So, having said all of that, when Battlefront 2 came out, there was a tie-in book called Star Wars Battlefront 2 Inferno Squad by
Yeah,
Krista
I have this
Golden.
one.
Um, I think this book is excellent. This was the first time I was exposed to reading a book set in the Star Wars universe, and B, it being told from somebody from the Empire's point of view. And as somebody who, you're watching Star Wars and it's very cut and dry, clear, like these are the good guys, these are the bad guys, the Empire is bad. To have a main character that you are diving into the world of, like, growing up in the Empire, seeing the Empire being a source of order in the midst of chaos, and even looking at the Death Star attack being like a terrorist attack, and like seeing the fall, or like reading about the fallout from that, was really fascinating. And it really like opened up my worldview a bit of like, what would it be like if I was in the situation, if I knew people who I'd grown up around like died in that? What would that incentivize me to do? And so um I just really, really enjoyed the book. And I guess the shot, like my MVP is just Christy Golden for making that
Mm,
just like work very
a very
cohesively
good
for
author.
me. It was just a really entertaining book, and made me think about like, ooh, maybe I could get into Battlefront. And then I was like, no, I'm still not a gamer, so it's
Mm.
probably not going to happen.
I completely agree. Battlefront 2, the video game, the story's okay. I played it. I had a lot of fun with some of the co-op aspects of that game, multiplayer. But yeah, this some of these books are really good, and a lot of them are just not really my cup of tea. But some of these books are really good. There's one from right before Rogue One called Catalyst, which is
Mm-hmm.
really exceptional book actually, and I think has always colored my opinion on Rogue One. Uh, I'm gonna just do two real quick because I'm pretty sure you said already that you didn't have them, and so it might get us closer to basically on pace with each other. 15 and 14, they're kind of interchangeable for me. 15, I had the Clone Wars TV show. 14, I had Rebels TV. And
Mm-hmm.
I know some people are a little like, are really hardcore fans of the animated TV shows. I understand it. I respect it. There's some really good stuff in these TV shows. A lot of it's filler for me, where it's just kind of week to week, where I'm just like, okay, I don't really care. But then there's like episode arcs that I think are incredible, and that's really just my opinion on them. MVP for Clone Wars is clearly Ahsoka, one of the most important characters to come out of the 21st century Star Wars, and just the commitment of Filoni to stick with this character after it really just did not work for the first two seasons in a movie. Uh, Incredible arc that they're doing with her, and for Rebels, it's Dave Filoni and Whitwer fleshing out Darth Maul, which I think is the best element of Rebels, along with Freddie Prince Jr., who's giving an incredible vocal performance in Rebels. You didn't have either of these on your list, correct?
Uh, Stay
Kind.
tuned.
Okay, okay. I thought you didn't have any of the animated, so I do apologize for stepping on that. You can jump back in. I figured, does that put you at 13 now?
I'm at 14.
Okay.
Um, but I'm gonna call an audible, and I'm switching my 13 and 14 so I can do this now.
Yeah.
So at 14, I said that I don't have anything from the animated series on here, but that's not entirely true, because in my 14 spot, I have the last four episodes of Clone Wars, The
Mm,
Siege of Mandalore. So when these final episodes came out, I did take the time to watch them, and having no context for the entire show. But I do know what happens in Revenge of the Sith. So watching those last four episodes, I was sold on everything I really needed to know about Clone Wars in a very satisfying way going into Revenge of the Sith and the fallout from it. Um, just all the stuff with Ahsoka and Anakin in particular, and like that was so incredibly satisfying, seeing her see Anakin one more time before he officially went to the dark side. And Ashley Eckstein is just so excellent as Ahsoka. Like, I was immediately sold on her. Um, in this, and it just added so much texture and flavor and weight to everything that happens in Revenge of the Sith, especially the last shot of Darth Vader, and like after the fallout from it, I was just so like it gave me chills. So that is my only representation of the animated stuff in here. But I'm not a real Clone Wars fan, but I really love the last 4 episodes. I think they're great. And my MVP is just Ahsoka and that, and really tying all of it together and making the weight of everything that was lost in Order 66 felt.
There's this one moment in Clone Wars, and I want to say it's maybe season 3, and it's really the thing that got me into Clone Wars because I'd never really cared about the war part of this animated show, and I didn't always care about the just Jedi adventures that we knew were Jedi that were gonna die. Like I really cared about Anakin, I really cared about Obi-Wan, I cared about Ahsoka, and I cared about the villains, especially Dooku and all of them coming in. And there's this one moment in and Cad Bane. Cad Bane's really good in Clone Wars.
And
There's
Satine, I will
and
shout
Satine,
out.
yeah.
I do know about Satine and Obi-Wan, and like we were robbed, but
That is the episode that I was going to draw because there is this
yes.
moment, and I want to say it's in season 3, and it's one of my favorite Star Wars moments where you get to meet this basically love interest that Obi-Wan Kenobi had, and it literally I'm tearing up thinking about it. But there is a scene in there where they're talking about the past, and he says to her, "You know, had you asked me, I would have left the Jedi Order for you." And it's all he has to say in that moment, and it's just the how much that defines Kenobi's character
Mm-hmm.
in everything, in every way I look at Kenobi now, whether it's from the originals, whether it's from the prequels, whether it's to his own TV show. It's that moment is such a defining characteristic, and you understand so much more about Kenobi and that loss. And then when that character eventually dies, and he feels himself bearing that weight again of now just having lost his master to then having lost his love to then losing his Padawan, all within like the however many years span. I just think it's beautiful, and it's one of those moments, and it's kind of we'll talk about it a little bit more when we talk about Kenobi, but it's moments like that that I wish we got to explore more in the TV show Kenobi. So we'll get to that in a second. But I mean, like I said, it's those moments in particular of Clone Wars that I hold above. Although same with the Rebels. I mean, Rebels has a few of those moments. I think Rebels when, and I hope this isn't a spoiler for you. I'm sure you kind of
It's
know the broad.
it's fine,
It's
honestly.
when Kanan sacrifices himself.
I did know about this.
It's
Yes.
it's again one of those moments that just it works so well. It's no dialogue. Same with like when Darth Maul and Obi-Wan Kenobi have their fight, and it kind of ties into this where you've known Kenobi with Satine in Clone Wars to that moment to Darth Maul collapsing. Uh, Sam Witwer has an incredible, just vocal performance in it. That's when the show sings for me, and that's when I find these shows at their most personal. And
So I'm gonna throw it to Taylor Swift really quick and show you this. So I tweeted this after Tortured Poets came out based
yes,
on LOML. It's
you're gonna have to love of my life, and then love.
loss of my life
Loss of my
when Satine dies. I was like,
totally.
I'm gonna hurt myself just a little bit more. Like just how I was even starting to tear up, even thinking as you were talking about the two
Tortured's
of
Poets
them. Like,
Department, yeah, yay or nay?
oh, yay for me.
I'm a big
I
yay on it
adore it.
too.
I am
I'm
a
pretty big.
big fan of it. Jury's out on where I'm landing it on my personal ranking because I just want to sit with it more, but I adore it.
I think it's low for my personal ranking, but I think it's really good.
Yeah.
So that's how I feel about.
Any, anyways, back to Star Wars.
Yeah, number 13 for me. I'll jump in because I know you've already had this on your list. It's the Phantom Menace. We already talked about
Nice.
this. Uh, there's too much of this movie that I just love, like to
Mm-hmm.
have it any lower with it. And I think this movie is quite ambitious, and it does not work in every moment. And I also kind of just wish we got back to summer blockbusters kind of looking like this to some degree. Like there is a
Mm-hmm.
emotional philosophical intelligence within Phantom Menace that I find really engaging. And then there's a we have to sell toys aspect of Phantom Menace that doesn't work as well for me. Uh, some of the Trade Federation stuff, it's weird. Some of the politics of this movie are questionable and just don't really work. But when this movie works, this movie works. And I think the MVP for this for me clearly is John Williams.
I
Uh,
mean, yeah.
like John Williams, and this is the score of his of Star Wars that I always go back to. I think this whole score of this movie is incredible. But
Mhm.
Duel of the Fates, I mean, this scene works so well, not just due to Lucas's incredible direction and action choreography in it, but it's Williams just letting it all go. I'm one of the few with this opinion. I actually think his prequel scores are better than the original trilogy scores. Like I think what he achieves in the prequels is pretty incredible.
Yeah, but like it's not as iconic as the original
No, I agree.
or like I can't fully endorse that, but I get what you're saying and I agree to some extent. He's doing excellent work during that time. Duel of the Fates belongs in the, Mount Rushmore of some of his best stuff. But it's hard to argue when you have like the Imperial March, you have Yoda's theme, you have Luke and Leia's theme, you have Han and Leia's theme, you have the
You have Ewoks.
ending scene, you have the hey, I love the
Nub nub.
Ewoks. Yeah, Yub Nub for
I
life.
good song. It's a banger.
Okay.
Let's toss it back to you. So you're on your 14?
I am now on 13 because I did
13.
I did a quick flip.
That's
So
right.
now at number 13 we have Mandalorian season 2 for
Okay.
me. Mandalorian season 2 I actually really enjoy, and it feels weird to put it this low, but at the same time it's also kind of the beginning of some issues that I've been having with live action TV Star Wars, and
Yep.
it's getting more of the inclusion of other aspects of the Star Wars verse, and it's kind of starting to blow up Mandalorian a bit more than just being an adventure of the week, with sometimes recurring characters coming in towards the end. While I really love Bo-Katan, Katie Sackhoff coming in into live action, and as I mentioned earlier, Ahsoka with Rosario Dawson. I do think that this one suffers a bit more with just like how much more it's doing, and especially towards the end, um, with the separation of Grogu and Din Djarin, which we got Baby Yoda's name in this. But there's still like a lot of it that I really enjoy. I really love Mandalorian. I think there's just so much cool stuff happening within it. I guess for my MVP for this, my MVP for this is
It
some
should
of the
be
direct.
obvious.
I mean, yes, Grogu, Baby Yoda, always. But I was gonna save. So cute, so cute.
It's so
Um, I mean, I was gonna save Grogu for Mandalorian season 1
yeah,
because
okay,
none
that's
of
fair.
us were expecting
That's
Baby
very fair.
Yoda to like blow up our lives the way that he has. But I think I'm going to shout out the directors of season 2, and specifically Bryce Dallas Howard and Deborah
She's
Chow.
incredible in this season.
They are incredible directors, which Deborah Chow would go on to helm Obi-Wan Kenobi, which I have a lot of positive things to say about. But Bryce Dallas Howard in particular, I think is an excellent director, and seeing her stuff in Mandalorian, and I think she does an episode in Book of Boba Fett as well, that I'm just like, okay, maybe Bryce Dallas Howard is going to win an Oscar one day, but it's going to be for directing and it's not going to be for acting. And I am actually here for it because all of the women from The Help, the main characters, have all won Oscars, and she's the last one standing. And I am here for her directing career. And I think it is highlighted extra well in Mandalorian season 2.
Yeah, I think I have Mandalorian a little bit above, so we'll get to it in a sec. Actually, I'll just share it right now. I have it at number 10, and I do have season 1 and season 2
Okay.
combined here. MVP Grogu. I mean, just
I mean,
we'll
come
get to it
on.
when we get to season 1 for you. Uh, I Star Wars TV is one of those interesting relationships that I now have in my life. It's kind of like the Sacramento Kings where I love it so much, but it also causes me a lot of physical pain week to week. And I spend far too much time thinking about it and being stuck awake at night about it. And yet every time a trailer or a new season comes up, or in specific terms for the Sacramento Kings, a new season, uh, I automatically feel myself becoming exciting, and a lot of times I'm end up thinking of 26 years of fandom. What was this all for? So I have that really weird relationship with Star Wars TV right now. Uh, I don't have that relationship with the Mandalorian season 1 and season 2. I do have it a little bit lower at number 10, and I think I have the kind of the Academy Award bias towards Netflix, where it's
Mm,
just like it's almost like the original sin in my mind at this point, where I'm just like, this was the cause of a lot of my issues currently with how Hollywood works right now, how Disney's kind of working, and specifically the direction of Star Wars right now.
mm-hmm,
But I don't really ascribe any of that to Mandalorian season 1 or season 2, but it is also the originator of it, so it's hard to
mm-hmm.
kind of separate the two. So uh it gets quite literally penalized because it's a TV show. However, I do have TV representation coming high on this list in a second. So that's why I have Mandalorian season 1 and season 2 where they are. And I don't love the deepfake stuff. I really the Luke
Yeah.
Skywalker stuff, it doesn't work for me. It looks bad. And yeah, that really soured me as well on some of my Mandalorian stuff because up until that point, like even if I was excited for the return of Luke, I just wish we didn't get it like that.
Yeah, totally.
So that's my number 10. So let's jump back to you because I jumped back in a second.
So what was your 13?
13 was Phantom Menace for me.
Oh yeah, okay. So number 12 for me, we're throwing it back to the books. And this is Leia by Claudia Gray, which this came out before The Last Jedi.
Mm, really
Leia is
good book.
such a good book. So I had to highlight it here. Princess Leia is one of the defining female movie characters for me. I am currently wearing a shirt of Princess Leia right now. Like, she matters so much to me. She matters so much to Star Wars fans in general. And with The Last Jedi and with losing Carrie Fisher, a book like this just kind of like kept this character alive and just gave me more context of all the reasons why I love Leia. It gives such a good story of her being in her teenage years, really starting to learn more about what's going on with the Rebel Alliance. This is also, it ties into The Last Jedi that she meets Holdo for the first time. She goes to Crate, which is where they end up at the end of The Last Jedi. And also, I love A New Hope so much. We will talk about it when we get there.
Mm,
My Always my biggest criticism with it is that we do not care about Alderaan when it blows up, when it is blown up by the Death Star. And thanks to the book Leia and to Obi-Wan Kenobi, we finally get Alderaan fleshed out, that we know what this planet is. We get to spend time there. We get to meet all of these different people. We get to see in Obi-Wan Kenobi, we get to see Alderaan. So we get to see what we lose. And that is what I really appreciate about Leia. And that is probably my MVP, is like, this was my first exposure to being on Alderaan and caring about Alderaan, because it shows how much we lose when we lose Alderaan in A New Hope.
yeah, no, this is a really good book. I do recommend this one as well. And Claudia Gray's the author, correct, for this one?
Yes, Claudia
She's
Gray.
done really good work in Star Wars throughout. So give me one more, then we'll jump back to me.
Okay. So number 11 for me is Solo, a Star Wars story.
Okay, and we skipped over this or I didn't
Yes.
skip over it. I said MVP Chewie and Denny's Diner.
Yes. So for me, I have Solo a bit higher because I feel as though Solo really suffered from all of the wake of the post Last Jedi
Yeah.
hate. And it also came out right near Infinity War, which was like it was doomed not to do well.
This movie
Which
should have come out in December. Uh, the
they should
strategy to
have they
move it
should
to
have
May.
kept it all in December, and it was a real bummer that they had to move it. Obviously they went through a crazy amount of production changes with losing Lord and Miller as the directors, having Ron Howard come in, and you weren't really sure how this movie was going to come together. And honestly, it did come together. It was a lot of fun.
Mm.
I didn't need to know where Han got Han Solo from. There are certain things that was just
Yeah, I forgot
unnecessary,
about
but
that.
like the Kessel Run was such a great sequence. Um, I loved oh my gosh, what is her name? This
Oh,
makes me
Amelia Clark's character in it.
yes,
God, what is her name? I have a Lego character.
Kira.
Kira.
I think Kira is such a great character. And I loved her chemistry with Alden Ehrenreich. Donald Glover just oozes charisma and he's great. Therm Scissor Punch, great alien character. But my highlight for this movie, the MVP for me, is Alden Ehrenreich. As Han Solo, I think he does a really good job of capturing a young Harrison Ford and Han Solo's mannerisms, and he really stepped up to the task. And he is a great actor, period. Last year,
Mm.
he had like a triple run of excellent movies that came out with Fair Play, with Oppenheimer, and with Cocaine Bear. And I am all here for this Alden Ehrenreich resurgence. I just want nothing but good things for him. And he should have been a huge movie star after Solo, and it didn't happen. So I cannot, like, for everything wrong that happened with this movie and its reception when it came out, Alden Ehrenreich is not the problem for me. And so
He's
he
yeah,
yeah.
he's really good in this movie, and I feel so bad for him because this was a no-win scenario for him as an actor. Uh, and it's kind of a no-win scenario. I think the only one that goes out well with it is Childish Gambino, who I think
Mhm.
is able to largely take this movie and really make a little bit of stardom out of it, though he wasn't able to capitalize a ton off it either. I think just because the movie flopped, but it certainly felt like people were talking more about Gambino. Aaron Reich's really good, and I hope he gets more chances to kind of prove himself as a leading man. Because every time he comes up to the bat, I always think he's really good, and it's just it was just an impossible task to put on an actor to be Harrison Ford's charisma of
Absolutely.
early 1970s, or sorry, late 1970s. Like that's just an impossible task to do. So I'll do my number 12 right here.
Yeah, you need
And
to do 12 and 11 so we can get into our top 10.
yeah, I'll do 12 and 11, and I'll try hurrying up because I know I'm going a little over time as usual. Number 12, it's another movie. I have Rogue One, MVP, Darth Vader, and capes. And I'm actually largely good about talking about Rogue One now because I have another tie-in to that later. But
Hmm.
what I will say about this is Gilroy's script is what makes this movie work. And it's even if I don't love how the movie gets constructed in the first act or two, the third act, the last hour of this movie is something special. And yeah, I mean, all my thoughts on Rogue One are kind of going to be talked about later with another entry on this list. So I feel like I
Hmm.
can almost table my Rogue One discussion. Number 11 for me, it's a video game. It's, I think, the only video game I have on here. I think that's true. 2005's Battlefront 2, which is the
Mm.
original Battlefront 2 game. My MVP is the Clone Commander because that is what allowed me to get through the story campaign, was playing those Clone Commanders and shooting Jedi in the feet, which was the easy cheat because if you just shot a Jedi straight at a lightsaber, they'd kill you every time. So that's why I've spent so many hours playing Battlefront 2. I can't even count. So I'm now at my top 10. So you can jump in real quick.
All right. Number 10 on my list is Revenge of the Sith.
I have it
Uh,
at number 9.
Amazing. Yeah. So Revenge of the Sith is my favorite of the prequel trilogy. I think it's hard to argue. I think most people have that as their favorite of the prequel trilogy. I think it's universally agreed that like they ended it well, all things considered. I love the story of the prequel trilogy. I don't love the execution of the prequel trilogy, but the way that they are able to show the ultimate downfall of Anakin Skywalker and the rise of Darth Vader is really well done. And I do believe like it does culminate with the battle on Mustafar and just the brokenness of a friendship, which I wish this trilogy would have shown more instances of their friendships to see how much we lost. Um, but that doesn't take away from how impactful it is in the end. I also don't really love the way that Padme is really pushed to the side and everything that she was in Attack of the Clones, as like feisty as she was, even especially in Phantom Menace, she's just like tabled and pregnant. And what are we gonna do? And I'm like, no, there's so much more to you. But
You guys have a broken heart. That's character development.
just ah, kills me. But I will say my MVP of Revenge of the Sith has to be Ewan McGregor as Obi-Wan Kenobi. I think he truly embodies who a young Alec Guinness I imagine would have been as Obi-Wan Kenobi. I think he really sells just everything that happens in the movie and his role to play um the downfall of the Jedi and the rise of the Galactic Empire begins. Just seeing his involvement with it. I love his fight with General Grievous. I think it's excellent, even with the extra arms coming out and all the lightsabers. I think
I'm
it's
for
great.
General Grievous as well.
Yes, and all the memes of like I have the high ground, 10 out of 10, no
This
notes.
movie is like 2.5 hours of meme. Like, I mean,
Yes,
I think this movie has almost defined meme culture as maybe the most important movie to come out in terms of
probably.
meme, just scene by scene. Yeah, no, I'm very much with you on this. I had a concept as my MVP here,
Mm.
and it's planets and world building is kind of,
Ooh.
and you had this talked about in Rise of Skywalker, where it's almost like there's one too many planets.
Mm-hmm.
This movie jumps planet to planet to planet.
Mm-hmm.
And I think all it does is make the world feel bigger and the
Mm-hmm.
galaxy feel lived in. And it's kind of what George Lucas always did as a master storyteller, was that ability to have a galaxy feel lived in and fleshed
Mm-hmm.
out. And that's when I think of Revenge of the Sith, I just think of his ability to make the world feel all that much bigger.
Yeah.
And I hope I didn't cut you off there on any of your thoughts, but that
No.
is that's why I have Revenge of the Sith at 9. I have Mandalorian at 10, so we already talked about that. Revenge of the Sith at 9. So I'm at my 8. Are you at your 9
So
right now?
my nine, whoa, sorry, I just went full screen. All right, so my number nine is actually Mandalorian season one.
Okay.
So I'll be brief about this. I think Mandalorian season one, it came out right at the same time as Rise of Skywalker. And of the two, I think Mandalorian season one really captured the essence of Star Wars. I think we had been missing for a bit, with having a Western feel, having a mysterious bounty hunter, and having these like week to week kind of missions of the week, but then also watching him bond with Baby Yoda, which none of us were prepared for the avalanche that would be Baby Yoda and our obsession with him. And this also came out right before COVID hit too. So we sat with Mandalorian season one during like the pandemic, and we could watch it and return to it on streaming in a way that like was really helpful and made things a little bit brighter in the midst of lockdown. So I do want to shout out as my MVP for Mandalorian season one uh, alongside Grogu, Baby Yoda, and our obsession with Baby Yoda because Baby Yoda is the best. Ludwig Göransson's score
Yeah, really.
for Mandalorian, which he just won his Oscar for the Oppenheimer score, which is excellent, obviously. But I think we undervalue like how great of a theme he came up with for Mandalorian, and it really like captures everything this show was born with in season one. And I just think it's anytime I hear it, I'm like, oh, we're going in for an adventure. Let's go.
Yeah, I onto the COVID point because I actually think that is really interesting as really like the last big piece of media we got before lockdowns really happened. I mean, I remember I had the toy Yoda, Baby Yoda, and like legitimately, I think they started shipping him maybe May or June of 2020. So I remember getting mine, and I kind of remember going so stir crazy that I was just like hanging out with Baby Yoda in my room. Like he'd just sit in my on my bed. Like when I was gaming, he'd just sit on my lap. I talk to him occasionally, just like kind of go over the day. Like he kind of just became my buddy, and obviously an inanimate object, but just kind of followed me around all day. Like I was just carrying him around. I'd watch movies with him. Like it was such a weird. God, COVID was such a bizarre time. And where now I say that out loud, I'm like, oh my god, I wasn't stir crazy. I was actually just full on going crazy during that period of time. But I mean, like I said, helped me out a lot. Love Baby Yoda. Have very fond memories of Baby Yoda, especially during that period of my life. And yeah, I think you hit the nail on Mandalorian. So I have, like I said, Mandalorian number 10 for me. Revenge of the Sith number 9. Return of the Jedi is my number 8.
Ooh, okay.
Uh, I saw this movie again for the first time in a while last year when they did I think it was the 40th anniversary.
Mm-hmm.
And I had seen this movie in theaters before, and they had obviously done the 4K restoration for the theatrical release of it. And I will admit, this was the first time where I had noticed some of the CGI and special effects really aging badly in
Mm-hmm.
Return of the Jedi. Like there were certain moments where I was just like, "Oh, this movie isn't working for me," and some of that magic just like isn't there. And I
Mm-hmm.
specifically feel it in the first hour. I mean, my complaint of Return of the Jedi has always been uh they essentially have this contract negotiation with Harrison Ford. They don't know if he's going to come back, so they freeze him at the end. And then when they're like, okay, we're going to bring him back, now we have to kind of spend an hour of this movie bringing him back. So I've always kind
Mm-hmm.
of just like struggled with that, where I'm just like, this is like not creatively the decision. It was quite literally like just the escape plan in case they needed to just keep him out of there. So I've always had issues with that. I mean, what this movie is the final confrontation between good versus evil, and that's what
Mm-hmm.
this movie works. And there's been so much written about Return of the Jedi. I don't really need to go into any more detail, but that's why it's number 8 and a little lower. My MVP of this movie is Princess Leia. I think just of all of it, she's the most iconic person to come out of this movie. Just the style, the looks, every outfit they give her in this movie, whether it's the slave a Leia bikini at the beginning, whether it's her just iconic one of my favorite stylings of Princess Leia was on Endor with the braids and that look,
Mm-hmm.
like just everything about this. I just think this is really, and it's also just given us so many great Carrie Fisher anecdotes about just everything about Return of the Jedi. It's just she's so funny when she talks about uh everything that came with this movie, and then like having to wear this outfit, and then like her complaining to George and all this thing, like the back and forth of it's just so funny. And yeah, I just think this is the movie that really just highlights who she is as a person and as a performer the best in that period of time as an actress for her. So that's
Yeah.
why it's my number 8.
So I actually have Return of the Jedi as number 6 for
Okay.
me. So I'll just share my comments really briefly because you basically echoed so much of what I will say later on. Um, I think Return of the Jedi is as good of an ending as you could get for an for the original trilogy. Yes, we spend that first hour back on Tatooine, and it kills a lot of the momentum. But once we get onto Endor,
Yeah, the movie
once
sings.
it sings, like it just it's everything that you want. You get the final battle between Luke and Darth Vader, now that we know that that's his son, and then his ultimately choosing Anakin choosing the light at the end of the day. The reveal that Luke and Leia are twins, and so that completely ends the weird love triangle that people were shipping prior to that knowledge, and making it clear that Leia and Han were going to be together, and having them reunite, be together. Also, Salacious Crumb, shout out my guy at
He's in my
Jabba's
office.
palace.
But I have the Salacious B. Crumb from Galaxy's Edge.
Salacious B. Crumb, MVP. We love him. Actually, he might be my MVP, in fact, because he's great. Also, Max Rebo's band playing jizz music. Shout out.
That's what it's called.
Yeah, that is actually what it's called.
It's so it's
yeah. But
George Lucas on his king shit.
Wikipedia says it, so it is so. But yeah, I adore Return of the Jedi. I love the Ewoks, and for it, if that was all we would have gotten with Star Wars is that original trilogy, I would have been completely satisfied, genuinely. I just think it caps it off really well. It's my least favorite of the trilogy, but that is in no way means of its quality in my mind.
We're gonna have a really similar top 5 or 6 is what it's looking like at this moment, I think.
Well, I'm about to throw a wrench because of something you ranked really low and I ranked something really high.
This was coming. Just do it right now, because since I already talked about it, you're doing. Can I guess it's Kenobi here?
It is Kenobi. So number 8
number
is
7, or number 8 is Kenobi.
Yes, number 8 is Obi-Wan Kenobi. This was my most anticipated show for me for a while, because we were getting Ewan McGregor back. Because Obi-Wan is my favorite character in Star Wars, probably, and he's obviously Ewan McGregor's Obi-Wan is my favorite in the prequel trilogy, so to get him back was really exciting to me. And what makes Obi-Wan Kenobi really work for me is the fact that it is centered on his relationship with Leia, and we get to see why she viewed him as his only hope in A New Hope. It gave so much more context and so much more weight to A New Hope, which is a movie I already adore, but you retroactively added even more stakes and made it even more meaningful to me. I was so impressed by it, and I loved the way that they brought back Uncle Owen and Aunt Beru, and they gave them so much more to do. You could really see the mistrust of like why having Obi-Wan around would be so threatening to Owen and the life that they have, and with the Inquisitors looking out for them. I do have problems with the series. I wish they would have fleshed out oh my gosh, what is her name? Huh?
Isn't it Reva?
Yes, I wish they would have like fleshed her out a bit more, and even some of the Jedi that they had in hiding towards the end. Like, I wish we could have gotten more with them, but otherwise I was really satisfied with it. And I loved the ending of Obi-Wan reuniting with Force Ghost Qui-Gon Jinn, because you already know I love Qui-Gon Jinn so much. Seeing him come back at the very end was so exciting to me. I wish we would have gotten references to Satine, but otherwise I really enjoyed this. It could have been cleaner, but of the live action stuff that we had gotten, I walked away very happy with Obi-Wan.
Kenobi is this weird scenario or situation for me with Star Wars TV, where it has a lot of the issues on it, but it's also kind of just gotten better over time, just because I've seen what comes from this, I guess, like, essentially. So it does kind of get better in that way. This show has a lot that I like and a lot that frustrates me. The whole Luke Skywalker element of this show just never worked for me. I wish we never saw Luke Skywalker. I wish there wasn't this scene where like they're basically dueling over a sleeping Luke Skywalker. Like this, how close these characters get to it just always bothered me. Like some of that element. I never liked the final duel of this, and that was one of the things that drove me crazy. Was the moment where it just feels like Kenobi can kill Vader and he doesn't. I just
Mhm.
thought had some questionable decisions for the rest of the galaxy at that point.
Oh my gosh.
What if he had just done that at that moment? And I
No,
just
but
go
so
for it.
I really want to jump in and say this. I'm so sorry. Something that I really loved about Obi-Wan was that we got Hayden Christensen back
Yeah, Hayden's
as Anakin,
incredible.
and his scene with him, his flashback scene. Well, A, Order 66 having that scene again, but B, having him with Obi-Wan again as they were training. I was like, these are the scenes that I wish we had in the prequel trilogy that we didn't get between the two of them. And so it just like it filled a need that like I had been craving for years with prequel stuff. But I do agree with that last battle. While I think technically it was really good, it
Yeah,
was very like kind of a whatever thing of like, well, we know we're going to come back to this and we know how this is going to end. Darth Vader is going to kill Obi-Wan Kenobi eventually. So,
I wish it was either more of a draw or an escape. Like the fact that at that moment Kenobi can kill Vader and just doesn't. And
yeah.
like that's always just kind of the pushback I have of this show. Besides that, the actress who plays Leia is really good in this show. Hayden Christensen's really good in this. Like the
Oh,
final
so good.
confrontation, even if I don't love how it concludes, I think both of their performances are standout. That's why it's my MVP is McGregor and Hayden, because I think they have so much shared history in it, and I think it works to really good effects. Number 7 for me, I have
Ooh.
this on mine. I don't think you're gonna have this on here. It is not a Star Wars movie or TV
Oh, no.
show. It's a place, and that place is Galaxy's Edge. I just threw it in.
Ah, you
I
smart cookie. I should have thought of putting it in.
I love Galaxy's Edge, and I mean I love Disneyland. And I should just like specify, like, I don't love the Millennium Falcon ride. That ride's a little, if you're not the pilot, it's not a fun ride. But Rise of the Resistance is an all-time favorite
Oh,
ride for me. Like,
Rise of the Resistance.
like
So good.
the first time I did it, it was 2021, summer of 2021, when they had just opened the parks back up after COVID, when it was
Mm-hmm.
like 30% capacity. So to experience it with the cast members all being there, so excited to be back, and just the energy, like the actual urgency I felt on that ride of having to throw on your seatbelts, like you are part of the resistance, like it was so emotionally impactful for me. And I just love being in that area of Disneyland. Like just legitimately photo opportunities, all of it is just so fun, and I just feel so engrossed in that world. I mean, my girlfriend's been hinting now for a few days that we should go back to Disneyland. I'm like, we were just there in February, but at the same time, I really want to go again. So we might be doing that sometime, hopefully in the semi future. But yeah, no, Galaxy's Edge, the best.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, well, yes, Galaxy's Edge is amazing. I will say on the Millennium Falcon ride, Smuggler's Run, as it is called,
Yeah,
I
that's
do like
how.
the gunner position, honestly, because then you can actually pay attention and like you can shoot, but then you can also enjoy and like sit back and watch the ride as well. Because the one time I was the pilot, I was so stressed out, and obviously I did really badly, but like I couldn't enjoy it the same way. So I will say the gunner position's pretty great. Rise of the Resistance is just a 10 out of 10
All-time favorite.
experience. I actually rode that in January 2020,
Oh, really? You got it
opening
before it closed?
weekend, and then it all closed down. So
Yeah, no,
I'm
it is every time it's a must for me. It's my
mhm.
favorite ride, probably in the parks, if not my favorite roller coaster ever. The drop in it, it's just so
Oh,
fun.
so
Everything of
good.
that is just I'm in awe every time I'm on that ride. I love it. It's just such a well designed everything. So that leaves my top 6, and does that leave your do you have number 7?
I do have a number 7.
Okay, what's your
It,
number 7?
it's The Force Awakens.
Okay, let's put a pin on that because I haven't put
Okay.
it. What's
Okay.
your number 6?
I already talked about my number 6. It was Return of the Jedi.
That's right.
I went ahead
That's
and
right.
tacked on my comments there. So I'm ready for my top 5.
Then I have my number 6, but I will save discussing on it because I know I have one on here that you don't have. So we do have the same top five, probably in different orders. Or we do have the same top six, but because obviously I have one added.
Yeah.
What's your number five?
My number 5 is Rogue One.
Wait, do we not have the same? Wait, okay. There's something going on that I'm probably miscalculating because I had Rogue One at number 12.
Yeah. Uh
I'm doing the math in my head. One, two. Oh, duh. Okay, duh. We hit Force Awakens. You already talked about that. That was your number seven, I think.
yeah.
But
You
we'll
said
talk.
put a
Yeah,
pin
put
in
a pin
it.
on that. Okay,
Put a
that's
pin
where
in
my
that.
math was wrong. Okay,
Okay.
Rogue
So
One.
so my number 5 is Rogue One. Rogue One was definitely a movie I wasn't expecting, and it was it was in a unique time of Star Wars where like I was riding the high from The Force Awakens. There's so much anticipation for episode 8. And here comes the first kind of spin-off story of Star Wars being Rogue One and the story of how the Death Star plans were stolen. And I didn't think we needed it, but that opening weekend watching Rogue One was definitely such a highlight for me. And as we have moved since 2016 and of Rogue One, it's amazing how much like it continues to stand the test of time of how good of a movie it is, how much it shows uh so much of the gray areas when it comes to the rebellion and the type of factions that are within it, and trying to make sense of how do we defeat such an entity that has spread itself out across the galaxy, and yet they're working on this weapon, and how are we going to bring in the right. It's essentially a story of how you unite a group of people in order to face off against something that seems insurmountable. And it's a group of misfits and shady people that come together and bring the Death Star to its knees, essentially. And um, shout out to Gareth Edwards and to Tony Gilroy, and just as much of there was so much behind the scenes stuff similar to a Star Wars story where there were rewrites and reshoots and stuff, but they managed to bring something together. And I think the MVP is easily Darth Vader,
Yeah, I had
when
it as
he
well.
is used excellently in Rogue One, and especially the scene at the end when he is just tearing through um the rebellion fighters like limb from limb. It's like everything I've ever wanted to see with Darth Vader, just so perfectly encapsulated in that scene. But I also loved his scene with Krennic when he's like, "I'd hope you don't choke on your own ambition." And I'm like, yeah, we have to see the power dynamics at play here with Krennic um and Darth Vader, and I think they do that very effectively. And I obviously really love Jen and Cassian Andor, but we're gonna save talking
Mm.
about Cassian in just a little bit. So
I
yeah.
I have the exact same feelings that you have, and honestly, the reason it's lower on my list is not because of the quality of this movie. I actually think this movie gets better on rewatch every time. I take something new away from it every
Mhm.
time. It's just kind of now like if I'm putting on this or that, if we're kind of in this Rogue One vein, I'm going to lean towards the other thing that we'll talk about in a second. But that's
Mhm.
the only reason. I mean, this movie, and I think it's also just due to the amount of talented actors in this movie. I mean, this has Riz Ahmed, right? Riz Ahmed is just a small part in this
Oh
movie.
my gosh, he's so
And
good.
he's so good as Bodhi in this movie. And I mean, it just has anyone from Donnie Yen. One of my favorite performances in this movie is
Yes.
Mads Mikkelsen's, which is a performance that
So
legitimately brings me
good.
to tears every time when he's basically explains why he had to leave her. And the
Hmm.
final line of "My Stardust" is
Yep.
just all of it, that monologue. And we're gonna get into monologues because again, Tony Gilroy is the master of monologues and he does it to
Hmm.
incredible effects. Yeah, no, this movie's incredible. This is one that just keeps getting better. And it's kind of a miracle this movie is as good as it is, given that we know so much of the production nightmare that this movie was. So that's your number. What was it?
That is my number 5.
Okay, let's just jump into my number six then. And
Okay.
the only reason it's 6 is because I have like one of these ones that isn't a movie or TV in this top one. So
Yeah,
it's in the top 5 if we're just going by
but
movie or
that
TV.
alone.
But number 5, it is, you know what? I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna pull Mulligan. I am going to switch it. I cannot believe I'm doing it, but I'm going to stand by this movie. Number 5, I have switched it. It is now Star Wars.
Wow.
1977
Okay.
Star Wars MVP Harrison Ford. Not else much else to say about it. I'm sure you'll be talking about it in a second. The reason I have Harrison Ford as MVP is because I think he actually is what makes this movie as successful as it is. We can basically enter this world, this galaxy far, far away, and where the entry point for us is Harrison Ford. And it's so based on this charisma of Harrison Ford as Han Solo. He's the performance I've always connected the most with. Everything of this movie works so well, and it's all time movie star performance for me from Harrison Ford in this. And it's just like when I look at the ones above it, my top 5, it's just what these other movies do and mean to me, or almost
Mm,
higher, because if you're going by the history, this should be 1 or 2. If you're going by like how this defines a generation and how this defines movie making, like this is definitely probably 1. It's just like I said, I it's an incredible movie. And I'm sticking with my guns because I wanted to move the movie I had at number 6 into the top 5.
all right.
Let's do, what number are you at now? I'm getting
Well, I
lost.
haven't talked about The Force Awakens, which was my number 7, and I just talked
Let's
about my number 5
let's do
being
it now
Rogue
because
One.
The Force Awakens is my number 4.
Okay, great. So The Force Awakens is number 7 for me, number 4 for you. I have BB-8 here. I fell in love with BB-8 watching Force Awakens. BB-8, I like to say BB-8 my life, BB-8 my child. He is my favorite droid. I'm sorry to R2D2. BB-8's my favorite. But that's not why I love The Force Awakens. The Force Awakens stands in my mind as this is what made me an open Star Wars fan again. Not that I wasn't a Star Wars fan before, but Star Wars was like something that you could talk about again, something you can get excited about again. And The Force Awakens was the movie that I needed it to be, that it entered me back into the world. It was basically like this soft rebootquel of A New Hope and Empire Strikes Back. And this was the only movie that I needed it to do this. I think it was the right level of nostalgia with having the original characters back in, a new generation of characters being brought into the mix, having the score, not having the same familiar locations, but similar to some degree,
Mm.
like Jakku being, a discount Tatooine, but there was still so much intrigue and excitement about it. And my MVP in this is Daisy Ridley as Rey. She
He's
is the
exceptional in
one.
this.
She is so exceptional in this, and she was my point of entry of like we have a new generation of not just like women in Star Wars, but like having this new trilogy be about her and her journey being this part of this new generation of Jedi. And her uh getting the lightsaber in her hand at the very end, um in her final fight with Kylo Ren, it still gives me chills every time I watch it.
I agree.
And John Williams' score called Rey, I think that's my favorite piece of score in new Star Wars, period. I think it perfectly just like captures her character. And it's when she is like sliding down after scavenging for the day and going back to her own, you know, um, her makeshift home that she has in the desert before she runs into BB-8. Like it is excellent to me. And I love Finn, who he represents in his character arc. I love Poe Dameron. I adore Poe Dameron. Actually, that's a larger thing, but like I love what they do in this so much, and I really like this idea that you can come from You could be Kylo Ren, and you could come from Han and Leia, these two heroes of the galaxy, and become a villain. And watching him double down and kill Han Solo, to me, I was like, you are a villain in my mind. There is no redeeming you at this point. Like, you have crossed that threshold. And I only wish they would have like doubled down on that even further. But um moral of the story is I will always adore The Force Awakens. I think it is aged badly now because of the rise of
Mm.
Skywalker, honestly, but it will never take away the chills and the feeling that I got and the hope that I felt from that opening weekend, and just the possibilities that were in store for us in this new era of Star Wars.
So I will fully admit that it being at my number 4. In terms of quality of the movie, A New Hope and my number 5 are better movies, unquestionably. Like, in my mind, it's not even questionable that they are better movies than Force Awakens. The reason why, and it's because it's a personal list, is because when I think of Star Wars, I now kind of think of my experience around The Force Awakens of Star Wars when it's at its purest for me. Uh,
Mhm.
this movie comes out right before I turn 18, my senior year of high school. My friends and I had been talking about it all for like a year or two straight. Like, when we started seeing the trailers, like the excitement going to the theater that Friday and like getting to see that movie for the first time. Like, that's an experience that I will never be able to forget. And the reason it's this high is because it's for my MVP reason. And it's because that December, Star Wars became a Christmas tradition. Like, it just
Same.
kind of defined like my Christmas experience. And it's why I just so desperately wish they'd go back to making movies, and specifically releasing movies in like Christmas time. Like,
Mhm.
I give me whatever the hell movie you want as long as it's in December. Like, just so I can have that kind of like 2 weeks where I'm off, not doing as much, work is less, and I just get to kind of sit with Star Wars, even if I don't enjoy the movie. Like, I'd just
Mhm.
rather be in that mode and feel that. And maybe it's a feeling that I can't ever get back because of a movie that we'll talk about on our list in a second, and just kind of what that has meant to Star Wars since.
Mhm.
But yeah, no, I just, for the experience of this movie, having all those memories, seeing this movie 7 times in theaters, seeing this movie with friends, seeing this movie with family, seeing this movie on Christmas, like all of it,
Mhm.
like it's just defined a really key portion of my life, and that's why it's at number 4 above movies that I think are better than. So that's why it's coming in at number 4, which you hit your next one, because we're
Yeah,
still doing some of
so
the same.
that means I'm at my number 4.
Yeah.
And my number 4 is The Last Jedi.
Okay, it's my number 5. It's the movie that I switched. It
Yeah.
was at my number 6, and then I put it at my number 5.
Well, if for the longest time, The Last Jedi was my number 3, but I have since moved it for something that recently came out, but which we will talk about. But The Last Jedi is definitely the nexus point in how Star Wars changed. And as I just mentioned with The Force Awakens, like The Force Awakens was the right type of movie to get us back into Star Wars, and that being that sequel reboot, like soft reboot of like, we're kind of doing A New Hope and Empire, but like now the possibilities are endless. And so Ryan Johnson comes in and he gives us something that we haven't ever experienced before, and doing something that was very similar to Empire. But unfortunately, we live in a time of social media.
Yeah.
And now we know how much somebody doesn't like something. And for me,
And boy, did we know.
and boy, did we know. And Ryan Johnson is still, I'm sure, getting hate tweets every single day of his life about
Yep.
how much he ruined The Last Jedi, which I so disagree with. I think The Last Jedi was exactly what the Star Wars world needed, because it needed to do something different if it was going to survive. And clearly Lucasfilm went back on that, but it was such a unique story to be able to show um how far somebody is willing to go to meet in the middle and potentially switch sides, and and seeing Ray really begin to learn what the Force is and how naturally it comes to her, but then also how naturally the dark side comes to her,
Mm.
and watching her relationship with Luke and how um that that fear has just kind of haunted him, and it's his fear that led to Ben's downfall, honestly, and him ultimately turning to the dark side. I like to see that our heroes don't always stay heroes, that they are still very human. And Luke's journey, I don't think Luke was ruined in The Last Jedi. I think it is a natural progression of what would happen once you grow up, because he was 18 at the beginning of A New Hope, and now he has experienced watching the same type of machinations come into power and it not being good enough. And so he would be disillusioned. He would want to isolate himself. I love the inclusion of the new characters. I love visually like what he does with Star Wars, what Ryan Johnson does with Star Wars. um, and I love the idea that this movie is based on a bunch of failure and what you do in the midst of failure. And I love that failure is the teacher that teaches our three main characters and even Luke himself how to pull themselves back up again. And my MVP in this has to be, it's my favorite. It's one of my favorite scenes. It's the scene between Ghost Puppet Yoda
Yeah.
back with Luke at the burning of the Force tree, and watching how his power, Yoda is still the most powerful Jedi. He is my favorite. Obi-Wan might be my favorite character, but Yoda is my favorite Jedi. And that scene in particular was like, yes, I can do this. I am still more powerful than you. And Yoda still has it, but that scene between the two of them, what he teaches him about failure and how he needs to move beyond just holding on to these texts and watching Ray thrive. It just still holds so much weight for me. I still get chills every time I think about it. So I'm gonna stop rambling,
Yeah,
but I love The
I'm in
Last
that
Jedi.
I'm in that trouble right now where I'm like, I'm trying to be conscientious of your time, and I also have two properties that I love coming up right now, and Last Jedi is one of those two.
Mm-hmm.
And like, so I hope you don't mind me going a little
No,
long on this, but
go for it.
Last Jedi to me is just a movie that just connects with me emotionally and pulls on every correct emotional heartbeat of it. There's so much of this movie that I love, and just to get it out of the way, just because I know there's definitely naysayers on this movie. Like, I don't love every choice that this movie makes. I don't think the Finn storyline is particularly well handled in this
Mm-hmm.
movie at times. Like, there are issues that I have with it. There is some logical stuff like, well, what if Poe and Holdo just talked and they realized like there is
I
stuff like
know.
that in this movie like that. I do get it. It's just that everything else of this movie is so top tier form for me that it's not even that I necessarily excuse it. It's that it all thematically pays off to me. Even if I
Mm-hmm.
don't like how it's achieved in the movie, it thematically all works together in this idea of failure that you had. And I think some of the discourse that came around with The Last Jedi is kind of just unfortunate. I wish Mark Hamill was a little bit more careful with his comments right when this movie had come out.
Dude,
I
yes.
love Mark Hamill, and to be honest, he's my MVP of this movie because I legitimately he could have been nominated for an Oscar for this movie for Best Supporting Actor. I think he is electric in this movie. It's by far his
Mhm.
best performance live action that I've ever seen. It's by far his best performance in a Star Wars movie. It just
Mhm.
unquestionable to me. Uh, the idea of failure, the themes of this movie, the just everything about it, like the scenes of this movie, and we haven't spent enough time talking about Adam Driver because this movie also largely works because Adam Driver is really given a director who just understands how to best utilize
Mhm.
Driver's persona in this movie, and he's outstanding in it. Like just every moment
It's
of
the
this movie.
most I like him is
Yeah,
in this movie. So,
he's so great as a performer in this movie, and he does so much where he is able to be so intimidating and threatening, yet so cowardice, small,
mhm.
and just the emotional arc with him. You feel it the entire time. You really feel that conflict. What Ryan Johnson does so well as a director is I never know what's going to happen next. This is still a movie that every time I put it on, you just kind of get lost in it. And it's just it all works to just such great effects, such chilling effects at times. The Yoda scene, which is also my favorite one, is just I mean, it's the lesson of Star Wars there. Like this Star Wars franchise is built on failures. Failures uh to save Anakin, but then eventually you get to redeem him. Like
Mhm.
the failures of the original Jedi, like all of it is so fundamentally core to understanding Star Wars as George Lucas had intended it in 1977
Mhm.
that it all just pays off to quite wonderful effects. And it's just such a beautiful movie. It's an extremely emotional movie. Uh, One of the scenes that I don't think that we talk about, and it's some of the Mark Hamill stuff. It's where I talk about that I think he could have easily been nominated, if not even won, an Academy Award for this movie. I just like there's the moment where he's having to essentially say how he failed, and he has
Yeah.
to admit that, and it's just such a moment of genuine regret and pain from this character, and to then have it go where the movie ends. uh and it's always been my criticism of this movie is Luke Skywalker is the hero, because despite all of it, he still is the spark that allows the rebellion or the resistance to move forward. In that final moment
Yes.
where he goes back to Crate and he just allows them all to escape.
Mhm.
It's one of those moments for me where it's a true hero persona. It's the idea that even in his failures, he can still rise above and be the hero that this galaxy knows he is. And
Mhm.
it's just this incredible beat. And the way Hamill plays every scene of this movie is pitch perfect. The final goodbye he has to Leia,
Ugh, kills me
just
every time.
every time, and it's such an emotional performance. Driver, like I said, Daisy Ridley is incredible in this.
Incredible.
Just they're all just working to such great effects in this movie, and
And I even want to shout out the scenes that they go with Benicio del Toro's character and talking about just like the gray areas of war and just how
mm,
like the rich will always benefit off of whoever's side with like weapon manufacturing and stuff, and like who are the people who are impacted the most by like Broom Boy at the end, like
mm,
he has the force and like there is hope for force sensitive people because like now the events of Crate, like Luke has become even more of a legend, but there is such a very pointed commentary of like the ways by which war operates that like I think always gets like lost in the shuffle as well.
mhm.
Not that the Finn storyline was the strongest by any means, but there was still so much there to chew upon that I think was excellent as well.
It's just every moment of this movie, and specifically, it all comes down to the throne room, which I think is the pivotal moment of this movie. And it's just
Mhm.
that is where I remember being in theaters and just not knowing where this movie could go. Where it was the
Mhm.
first time in a movie that especially with a Star Wars movie, where I really just felt like, what's going on? Like I actually feel
Mhm.
a little unsafe in what they're now trying to achieve in this movie because I
Ooh.
don't know what's going to happen. And everything of it, I my favorite maybe scene in any of these sequel trilogies is when the lightsaber goes through Snoke and it's the John Williams and she catches it.
Ah,
It's just
excellent.
everything about it. It's just like I said, this movie works, and it's the whole idea of Luke Skywalker has now ascended to how we view Luke Skywalker. Like it is the
Mhm.
point of mythology. Like the text no longer matters. This is he can define who he is in this
Mhm.
moment. I just find it so beautiful, and that's why Last Jedi is probably the closest we'll get to a masterpiece from Star Wars in a hot second, minus a TV show that we're going to be talking about shortly. Uh,
Yes.
so Last Shadow is my number 5. It should be above Force Awakens, but like I said, the Christmas effect of Force Awakens is too impactful for me. Number three, it's not anything. It is just simply the way I kind of learned to love Star Wars, which is, sorry, it is Legos. Just having Lego toys, and
Nice.
having all them. I collect them. I had a ton of fun with them. Lego Star Wars.
Also,
Yeah.
I was gonna say in inclusion with Legos, I'd like to shout out the Lego Star Wars holiday special. I watch that every year
Yeah.
for Life Day. It is perfect. It is delightful.
It's very fun.
I adore it, and it is not part of my list, and it honestly should be. But since you mentioned Legos, like it can be tied for my number three spot, honestly, because I do watch it every year now, and I always feel giddy and happy every time I watch it.
This is my toy collection for Star Wars. I mean, this is how I learned all the characters' names, like having all their minifigures, having the stats, keep learning all the ship names. Like this is really fundamental to for me to understanding the world of Star Wars is these Lego sets. So quick one, but I threw it at my number three because it is so integral for my development and specifically my love of Star Wars, which leaves two titles for me at my 2 and 1. Let's go back to you.
So my number three, which I imagine is either your number two or number one, it's Andor.
It is my number two.
Okay, so yeah, let's talk about Andor and the fact that after Obi-Wan came out, I definitely had a sense of, okay, I'm liking what Star Wars is doing right now, but Andor feels like I don't know how this is going to go.
Mhm.
And boy, was I in for such a surprise with how much they nailed Star Wars in a way that, like, this is exactly what we should be digging into more. This is the type of Star Wars that is able to return to familiar time periods and familiar locations, but actually have something to say about the world, have something to say about Star Wars and how the Empire works, and how, again, how I mentioned in Rogue One, how this rebellion alliance really came to be, and it came through these factions. It came through witnessing the horrors and the deep, uh, even just like the idea of just keeping your head down far enough. And why is that car going down this road like that? I am so sorry. Um, it's the way by which that they're able to say something about how the empire functions, and that as much as they care about order and as much as they're very bureaucratic in how they do things, there is a threat to them that you actually get to see the ways by which they operate. And then you have these leaders working in the shadows, like Luthen, like Mon Mothma, like oh my gosh, Mon Mothma's cousin.
Oh, I can't come up with their name.
It's
I'm
gonna
not gonna
bug.
pull it.
It's gonna bug me
I
real
might have
quick.
to look it up. Hang on. I know who you're talking about. It's a her, right?
Yep.
Is
Oh,
it Vel?
Vel. Yes, Vel. Vel and her team. And then you have the other side. You see like the type of people who are part of the system of the empire, like Dedra, like Cyril. Um, it is so fascinating to watch it. And then also you have some of my favorite shots in recent Star Wars, like cinematography wise, like all the stuff that's going on with in the episode called The Eye, and then One Way Out. Like there is just so much beautiful imagery on display while also being very horrific of the very real world things that are going on in our world, and also commentary on like the prison systems with that whole arc in Andor as well, with Luthen's amazing monologue at the end of One Way Out of like what it costs to fight this fight.
Mhm.
And even thinking about it now, I'm like, Stellan Skarsgård, you should have an Emmy for that.
He's
Like
my MVP. So
he
he is
is
the MVP of this show to me.
he
And
is the
everyone's in this
MVP.
show is incredible. It's his monologue in this show that is like what makes the show such incredible television. And listen, I'm kind of on the belief that I've said it, television is not really my mode of watching
Mhm.
anything. I've watched, I think in this past year, besides episodes of South Park, uh I watched Percy Jackson and I
Mhm.
watched Ahsoka, and that
Mhm.
might be all the television I've consumed in the past year. Like that
Mhm.
might actually be true. Andor is one that I consumed and looked forward to every week. What this show achieves is something nothing less than spectacular. The fact that Disney made this show is kind of wild. Uh,
Yeah.
this is a
Yeah.
show that is so politically charged and so pressing in current American uh topics, I guess is the easiest way to say it. And it's so aware of the climate of which it exists in, and it's actively commentating on it. And it's this show that has many ideas, and a lot of the ideas come to in war, no one can be altruistic, no one can be absolutely good. However,
Mhm.
usually in war, there is still some side that is far crueler, far eviler, and what does that mean that your means can justify your end? And what does that
Mhm.
mean? What does that take of a person's soul to make those decisions? One of my favorite moments of Skarsgård, and it's with Forrest Whitaker, who is
Oh, great scene.
exceptional in this show, is when they just talk about the lives of 50 men versus one man.
Mhm.
And it's just like, well, I need that one man to be alive. And he is far more important than these 50 men who will die in order
Mhm.
for that. And that's what the show is about. It's these people having to make these decisions. The way they develop Mon Mothma in this show, just the fact that she has to essentially sell, not
Incredible.
sell, she has to give her daughter's hand in marriage to basically keep this cover and to essentially allow the rebellion to exist. It's all of these ideas coming together. And you mentioned like some of them. One of my favorite moments is in episode 6, which I believe it's the Eye, right?
I
The Eye is the
love the
episode. The Eye
eye.
is my
That
favorite episode of Star
so
Wars
good.
TV ever. And it's all of it just being in there. It is essentially this group of terrorists who have to take over this plant and go through. And on juxtaposed to it is the scene of the native people of the planet going to celebrate uh, these lights, and it's this idea that the empire has stripped them of their color and personality. That's what
Mhm.
fascism is, the idea of the stripping of identity and making it so uniform in
Mhm.
their vision of what is real and good. And just that moment where you get everything. I mean, you it gets the callbacks to Rogue One where the
Mhm.
climb, just
Ah,
every moment of it works. I mean, just like I mean, they take hostages in it. It is no one has clean hands, and it's the
and people
beginning
die at the
premise.
end of this. It's like so
Yeah,
much of their crew is dead by the end of it, but whether from the mission itself or the fallout from it, like um what is his name? Who he is crushed by the money that
the
they're
man
stealing.
who writes the manifesto. I'm blanking on
Yes.
his name as well, but the manifesto is such an important part of it. Even like episode 1, clearly at the beginning, just Andor is someone who's just killed Chew, essentially cops. So, like that is who
Yeah.
they're just guards who just so happen to be in the wrong place at the wrong time, and they get killed for it. And that's who
A-
we
And
learn this
he ends
protagonist to
up
be.
on the Empire's radar. And it's like this domino effect of like this one bureaucrat's obsession with trying to find this guy who killed these two officers and the fallout from it. And honestly, if I'm going to say this, Karn, he is responsible for the Death Star blowing up, because if he hadn't been such a goody two shoes, none of this probably would have.
Well, it's all of it just so well balanced in Andor, and I haven't gotten the opportunity to really just share my thoughts on Andor. I never did a review of it, which I did kind of regret. Never doing
Mhm.
a review of it, but it's just everything in this is just so brilliantly layered from how we develop the character of Andor to his mother character that ties back so well in the final
Yes.
episode. I mean, the depiction of fascism in this show is just astonishingly real, And
Yeah.
ideas that they capture, you talked about the prison system, all of it, like the nods to Stanley Kubrick in Clockwork Orange, just
Yep.
all of that there. And then not on top of that, like the idea that the punishment of these prisoners is that if they step out of line, they get fried. And then like their reward is taste in their food. Like
Mhm.
the fact that they've even just stripped it so down to just that taste is a luxury to them. It's so cruel.
And the
And
f
then, yeah,
and the fact that they are building parts for the Death Star.
yeah.
Like, the one of the people who is responsible for the Death Star's destruction is making parts that are being attached to a working Death Star.
Yeah, the
Like,
literal
the
cog in the
way it's
machine.
just the cogs in the machine, which, like, it's just so well done and so well, like you just said, pacing wise, that they're able to, like, have that stinger at the end of season 1 of, like, that is what they were working on this whole time, like, in order to just have taste for the day and not get
Mm.
fried, were parts to the Death Star. It's
And Andor's arc in this is incredible because it's essentially someone learning that they can't be on the outside of evil. Like they have
Mhm,
to take a stand, and there is no level for apoliticalness or however you want to describe that.
mhm.
Like it's all in uh this show. And I mean, like you see this character essentially become radicalized as he
Yep,
begins to learn the horrors of this essentially dictatorship that is ruling. And the brilliance of it is we never see the Emperor, we never see Darth Vader. The evil
yeah,
is all conducted through bureaucracy, the people who are willing to just follow orders for their own personal gain. You mentioned
mhm,
Cyril, who is just, I mean, he's the definition of just such a creep in this
yeah,
show, and he does nothing really threatening. And yet it's the fact that this pathetic maneuvering person
mhm.
that's so easily clear in his ambition can accrue such power in this type of fascist regime. Like that
And
is
the
like,
same with Dedra as well, and
mm,
she was somebody who I was waiting for it to be revealed, like, "Oh, she's actually a spy, like, she's actually not part of the Empire," but then, like, you're watching, like, as a woman continuing to succeed, it's not for the benefit of anybody, it is for her own personal gain, and we see the type of power that she's able to inflict on other people, like torturing Bix,
yeah. And
it so, like, oh, it's
it has it all because it's not only a show that deals with, like I said, the political climate, it's a show that deals with gender politics. It's a show that deals with just everything that it makes it such brilliant TV that it's almost hard to like grasp that this is something that's come out in the past 5 years. I mean, this is one of those ones where everyone should watch this. This is by far the most brilliant thing that's come out of Star Wars, I think, since my number one in 1980, which just spoiler alert, but like it is to me, this thing is just incredible. It sings so well. And it just all leads to this final moment of the season one where it's and I talked about monologues, and that's why Stellan Skarsgård is my MVP for this, is just solely because of how well he delivers Tony Gilroy's dialogue. And just
mhm.
everyone, the one you mentioned, the one where it's what does it cost? And he says everything, like the whole stinger
Mhm.
to that. And then when we finally get to this ending with the mother character for Andor, and
Ah,
she like talks about everything that she had wished, the whole idea of the empire being a disease that needs to be eradicated, and then
mhm.
for her tombstone literally to be used to bash in the head of the empire, and that whole riot that
So
just
good.
goes on. It's radical TV making. Like it isn't something you really see in most mainstream shows, especially for Star Wars. It's like I said, I've always been shocked that this show came out uh under any major studio influence, just because it is so politically charged. uh Everything about it. I just think it's such a brilliant use, and all of it goes so well. And Skarsgård's the MVP of this to me because every moment of him on this show is just it's the thesis of Andor explored through all these characters. And one last shout out I'll give before we move on from Andor, because I haven't said his name yet. It is oh my gosh, Andy Serkis. Andy Serkis in this,
Yeah.
that's probably my favorite moment of Andor is his speech. when he
Yeah.
it's my favorite moment in the show actually is at the end of, I believe it's episode 9, where he learns that there is no thing as freedom in the Empire, that they are all going to die, that they will all eventually be moved to a different prison. And
Mhm.
it's that moment where he gets radicalized, where they're walking out. It's the perfect finale for an episode. It's one of my favorite finales for an episode ever of TV, where Diego Luna asks him, how many guards are there? And he responds, never more than 12.
Yep.
And it's just that moment where you fully feel that character. And then for him to have the speech that he gives, the fight the Empire, when the first prisoner steps foot and realizes they know can no longer be fried, it's brilliant. Like I said, I love Andor, and I could talk about it for way longer, and I probably will have to do it at some point. But that's why it's my number 2.
Yeah.
That leaves your 2 and your 1, which, well, I think we all know what your 2 and your 1 are. So it's the question of order. So what is your number 2?
Yes. My number 2 is The Empire Strikes Back,
Which is
episode
my number
5,
1.
which is most people's number 1. And it's hard to argue the excellence of Empire Strikes Back because it is truly a testament of how do you improve upon a near perfect movie? You make a near perfect sequel.
Mm.
And this is where Star Wars like cements itself as the cultural zeitgeist as we know it. Like it already happened with A New Hope, but then to do it again, but with the addition of Yoda, with the addition of the love story between Han and Leia, with the addition of
Billy D.
the reveal,
Williams.
huh?
Billy D. Williams.
Billy D. Williams. You have with the huge reveal of Darth Vader being Luke's father, that changed everything. That was a twist that like nobody saw coming, and it has been parodied and memed since. Like there's so many iconic things that came out of um Empire Strikes Back, and with the AT-AT walkers, with Hoth, with Dagobah, everything about it, it's a near perfect, or it's one of the best sequels to ever be made. And it's a near perfect movie. It's hard to argue the excellence of it. The only reason I have my number 1 where it is truly because like it is one of my favorite movies and it gives me chills every time I watch it. Whereas like I don't have that same type of chilled impact when watching Empire because I've seen it so many times, but like that does not diminish the quality of Empire Strikes Back. And yeah, I it's hard to question why Star Wars continues to say in the lexicon it wouldn't have happened without Empire Strikes Back.
You hit all my points on Empire Strikes Back, so I'll be real quick on it. Empire Strikes Back, personal experience. I got to see this movie at the Hollywood Bowl back in 2018. Magical way to see that movie.
Mm-hmm.
And my MVP for it is the Muppets slash puppetry slash Jim Henson's company. The
Yes.
the fact that Yoda works as well as he does is incredible, and it is kind of a testament to the whole George Lucas vision. Everything about it, like it is just such an incredible, uh, just moment. Just when Yoda comes out, the idea that something so small can be this powerful and wise. Yoda's my favorite character in Star Wars. It all just
Mhm.
works. Brilliant effects. And yeah, you summed up Empire Strikes Back perfectly.
All
Which
right.
leaves your
So
number 1, which I
it
already talked about.
leads my number 1, which is I will be very brief with this because we've been talking for so long. But my number 1 is the one that started it all, Star Wars: A New Hope. This is, in my mind, a perfect movie. Star Wars, I think, for a one and done movie, it really has everything you want in a movie. It really sets up the world that we're in, the villains at play. We have our character. You mentioned earlier your MVP was Harrison Ford, Han Solo, as the lens by which we go into this world. I would argue that's actually Luke.
It's
Luke
fair.
is this farm kid from Tatooine, who is just ready to explore and get outside of his world. And then here comes these two droids that change his life forever. Um, my favorite character is Obi-Wan Kenobi, and Alec Guinness is perfect as Obi-Wan. He is my ideal Obi-Wan Kenobi outside of Ian McGregor. Obviously, the way that he sacrifices himself for Luke during his fight with Darth Vader still gives me chills every time. And it all culminates in this perfect finale with the Death Star being blown up and hearing Obi-Wan's voice, like, use the Force, Luke. And you just get the sense of satisfaction when, like, he takes a deep breath and he flies away in his X-Wing as it blows up. It is the perfect representation of good versus evil in a blockbuster a blockbuster movie that we didn't even know could even exist. So I adore this movie so much. And if I have to give an MVP, it would just be the score, and specifically like the scene of the binary sunset where Luke is looking on, and you just feel the sense of like there's so much more waiting for him out in the galaxy, and he has to just sit and wait for it to come to him. And yeah, I love Star Wars, and every time I watch Star Wars, I get the chills when I will see the Death Star being blown up. And the way that it continues to have a hold on me, it takes a lot to dethrone it as number one, and there has nothing to come since to do it. So
Yeah, I mean, it's a new hope. Like, I mean, it's so iconic. You're correct in your assessment of Luke Skywalker being the character that we do enter through, because that is when I was referring to Harrison Ford, I was more talking about like the idea of like he's the everyman.
mhm.
Just like he almost like it's so foreign to him, this idea of this galaxy of the Force, good versus evil, which is also the true for uh Luke Skywalker in this movie. It's just the way that he brings that energy. And again, it's kind of this idea of even through all of it, he's the heart of gold. He has to go back and he saves the day. Uh, this movie is wonderful. And I think what makes this movie work so well is that binary sunset that you just brought up, which is it's what George Lucas, I think, fundamentally understands in his read of the first Star Wars movie, which is the reason we connect to this hero's journey is because even if we have never found ourselves looking at a binary sunset on planets as we are about to go face good versus evil, we've all had that moment of where I'm not happy in my life. There's much more to this world. I want to know my place in this world, and that's what that moment is. Like, it's such a beautiful and John Williams score. It's a really like touching moment, and that's what this movie is just all over. And I think it's a fascinating movie to think about when it comes out in the 1970s, a few years post Nixon
Mhm.
scandal, ideas of Vietnam, uh, who we are as a country at this point. All of it's like is in great. All this, what it means as a filmmaker at this time, how it revolutionizes Hollywood. You can look at Star Wars in a multitude of lenses. I always choose to look at it as what it is, which is a spectacular craft in filmmaking. And it's a good list. So that is our, I had 25, you had 20. That is our talking about Star Wars. So Meredith, thank you so much for joining me. We're connected in a few things. We're connected in our Star Wars love, our Taylor Swift fandom, and I'm probably going to guess we're also connected in our PTSD from Patrick Mahomes.
Yes, yes, we are.
I don't think there's been anyone in my life who I see their face and I instantly just like feel just like hatred.
Well, and I
Oh,
also
hatred.
it's a weird place to be also with Travis Kelsey. Like, the news came out that he is now the highest paid tight end, and I'm like, man, I'm happy for your relationship with Taylor, but like, I hope you get beat down this season.
Oh no, it was brutal. I mean, he beat Purdy in the Super Bowl, and that's my guy. And
Well,
just
he beat Josh Allen,
yeah,
my
he beat
guy.
Josh Allen.
It was heartbreaking watching
How do
that
you feel about
game.
your guys' draft? Did you like the decision? I've heard some really mixed things from some of my friends.
I do not keep up with the draft necessarily, but I did see our decisions, and I mean, I really hope our new wide receiver is up for task and will deliver. I really care about our defense staying healthy the whole season. That is always what it has really come down to. So getting a new safety was really important. Um,
It's torturous
I
watching Mahomes play. I can't deal with it
yeah,
anymore. I've dealt with it now. 2 Super Bowls. You've had
he's our
how
new
many times
he's
has
our
he
new
eliminated the
Brady.
Bills?
He's our new Brady. I can't with Patrick Mahomes anymore or the Chiefs. Like they are the new Patriots, and the Bills have been underdogs for so long, and we beat them in regular season, but when it comes to the playoffs, it is just
It's a
like
different beast, and it's
it's a
so
different beast.
intimidating. I knew the exact second when it went into overtime and Mahomes had the chance to win the game. I knew instantly we weren't going to be able to stop it. I
Yeah.
knew for sure that Mahomes was going to get that touchdown, and it drove me crazy. And I think he's the athlete I've hated the most in my life since Steph Curry. And but
Wow.
the
I
Kings got
mean,
the revenge on Curry this year, so I can live with it. But
listen,
Mahomes is
Tom
just like,
Brady is always going to live high in my mind because I'm a Bills fan, and being in the same division as the Patriots does something to you during that period of time. So,
yeah, no, that's fair. We just the Niners
but
get
yeah,
to
the
beat up
Patrick
on
Mahomes
the
stuff, though.
Cowboys, so I can live it with it. So where can people find you real quick, Meredith, before you leave?
Yes.
Oh, and tell them about your new article. I believe it was for Collider, your social network.
Yes.
Collider.
Yeah, so you can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and Letterbox at Meredith Loftus. But I also write for Collider and for Marvelous Geeks. And recently I just posted an article for about the social network, and looking at how it is much more of a psychological boardroom thriller than it is a commentary on social media because of when it came out and how social media was in its infancy. But there is really a special warning that comes into play with Erica Albright's character. So check that out if you feel like reading it. I really loved writing it, and I have some Bridgerton things and Dune 2 related things and some Fast and Furious things in the works that might be out by the time this episode comes out. So check that out in the future.
That's really exciting. Aaron Sorkin, of course, the writer of the Social Network. I will be spending a lot of time on him when I do a 40-hour pod on his January 6th movie,
Ooh.
Solo. So that will be great. And then what else? Meredith, thank you as always for joining me. Check out Meredith's work. And on this channel, this episode's dropping May 4th for May the 4th. Day before, I have my Fall Guy review coming out. Is it the Fall Guys? The Fall Guy?
It's the
Guy?
Fall Guy,
The
which I
Fall
have
Guy.
seen.
I'm seeing it tomorrow, Wednesday. So Fall Guy, Friday, Thursday, Phantom Menace review coming out, and then I feel like I have a review coming out Sunday. Maybe I don't, but just check out the channel. I have stuff coming out. And Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes review coming out.
Cannot wait for this movie.
I see it next week, beginning of next week. So I'm excited for that. Meredith, thank you for joining me as always. And I hope you guys enjoyed this episode that I told Meredith before recording I was going to try to keep 60 to 90 minutes, and I failed miserably as I usually do.